All right, I hit go live, which might imply that we're going live.
It might imply that we're going live. Now that we are live.
I mean, we might not. It's hard to tell.
Especially if I'm streaming as well.
Oh yeah, did you go live?
Yeah.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Chat's gonna have to give me a second to boot up my laptop. My other laptop. See, this is the minis forum. I was using it as an external display, but it can be its own laptop. There's actually so it's got its own card reader, and so like I can leave it uploading footage from my camera when I take my real laptop.
I downloaded the new grocery outlet app on my phone. Let me tell you, it's like having my.
This is YouTube ads because I only have premium on one account. The minis forum makes a 2-in-1.
Yeah.
What is it? What's inside it?
8840.
Okay. Okay. So some power in it.
Yeah.
To be honest, that does look quite thick. It's thick. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fine.
Is that a ½ inch? More than? Feel the weight.
Got some heft to it.
Now feel Meteor Lake.
That's much less heft.
Yes. Now, Snapdragon.
That's a little more heft.
Yeah. I don't know how many Snapdragon PCs you've held over the years.
Well, even the old ones, a few, but some of the new ones, just like 2, 3.
But why are the new ones so heavy?
I don't know. See, the Surface has got the dual fan thing going, and it's like,
Yeah.
dual fan is not impressive.
I think this said it was 77 watt hours, so maybe that's some of it. Whereas the older ones used to have 45.
Yeah, it's still, though, I mean, not fabulous.
It's, yeah. What order did you want to do stuff in?
It doesn't matter. We're at an undisclosed location,
Yep.
just randomly, and so this is randomly put together. It's going to be very, very low production quality.
Organize this over lunch.
Yeah, basically.
But all good fun, because Wendell's had a video that's taken off.
Eh,
He doesn't care, but I'm pretty sure the rest of us do. So we're gonna cover a little bit of that. We're also gonna cover all the because you also did a video on the Snapdragon stuff.
yeah, I seem to be the only one that's not impressed.
You're not paid.
That's true.
That being said, well, I mean, we can get into it because I thought the response was ultimately mixed, but I can see some parallels with the Zen launch, but in a slightly different context. We can go into that.
I guess I see aspects of the launch that are unnecessarily frustrating from like a developer standpoint, because the developer experience didn't have to be as terrible as it was. But also I'm worried because Microsoft, I would expect because I see Qualcomm as like the scrappy little upstart here, not having the experience to run things like operating system level driver quality assurance. Like they're not even the automated infrastructure. And so I sort of expected Microsoft to step in and say, "We got you, fam." But instead, they threw them under the bus.
What you have to realize is the impression Microsoft gives is that they don't care about hardware.
That's not true, and we both know that.
The impression.
Is that a show for the antitrust people? Like, why would they do that?
No, as in they care about selling you a service. The services, not the surfaces. That may be a little bit. The services that ultimately leads to, them making money. They make the money from the device by the license in it, but then that's probably batch licensing they give to OEMs anyway.
I don't think that's true anymore. I think they make the money from the device by making their Bing stats go up, which involve perverting the operating system to various levels to make the Bing stats go up.
Oh, so when you open the start menu, that's counted as a Bing access.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shady.
Yeah, if you were a shareholder that was clued into that kind of behavior, you'd put a stop to that.
Yeah. But then, so ultimately, the way I see the full Copilot Plus experience is an AI PC, because I guess that's also one of the themes we've been dealing with. Microsoft has pushing Qualcomm, AMD, Intel into increasing the performance of the NPU to support Copilot Plus to run stuff on device so they can save money by not running it in the cloud. Spend 5 billion today to save 100 billion over a decade.
Maybe, yeah. Well, it's the cloud's never going to catch up in terms of latency.
No,
but
or security.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, certainly whoever engineered Copilot and Recall is not going to catch up in security either.
Recall's its own little bug in the works.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at that. So I really, there's so many different ways that Microsoft could go that would be smarter, even if their business MO is, we need this in order to have a product that users are willing to pay money for.
It's, I think, especially on the business side, a lot of people are saying this is the next update cycle for devices.
Yes.
Add in AI.
Yes.
However, it feels like it's been an accelerated update cycle. So this just means it's the period where people go promote for a major refresh. We saw it with Centrino.
Yep.
We saw it with Ultrabook.
Yep.
We saw it with Athena/Evo.
Yep.
AMD tried to do it with its own A+A sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole point is, if you drive an update cycle, you'll drive revenue because you're convincing people to update sooner.
You know what's missing though? The killer application.
Which is all. This is. I would say it's chicken and egg, but the answer to chicken and egg is always egg.
Yeah.
Right? There's an answer to that. The whole point of a GPU when it first came out was, what can it accelerate what we're already doing, and what new experiences can it provide?
Yep.
Those two pretty much orthogonal to each other.
Yeah.
And so what did we get? We got accelerated stuff we already doing first, and then the new experiences came second.
Yeah.
Over the period of 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And that part of that was just the developer base being relatively small in comparison to where it is today. Where we are with these AI PCs, NPUs, whatever you want to call it, that's where we are. We're at the point where we're thinking, what can we accelerate today, improve productivity, which is the business side of thinking about things, not necessarily the consumer side. And then how can we drive new experiences? And the killer app is expected to be on the new experiences side, but we don't know what it is. And we've got a bunch of people making tools, hoping that the craftsman with the tools will do something. But therein lies the issue. The tools are never not consistent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just a lot of words to say that a developer that is trying to use one of these is going to have a real hard time because it's different on AMD, Intel, and Snapdragon.
Yeah, it's... Whenever I explain this to investors, I always say it's like where the GPU market was 25 years ago.
They don't understand that.
No, but then I explain it to them. We have...
And that's how you make money.
And that's how you make money. Yeah. You have at minimum 4, or 10, 12 different people making the hardware. They all have their own way of interfacing with the operating system. They all have their own APIs. They all have their own way of describing what's a thread, what's a warp, what's a memory access. And so they go build a software stack so that people can use that. But there's nothing in common. There's no unifying way for somebody to write software once to use everywhere. I mean, with graphics now, we have DirectX and Vulkan. You target that. You still need to do driver optimization on a per game basis because of shaders and crap.
We're a long way away from that, although Intel would say we're not because they're going with the WDDM driver model. They're basically the same as a GPU driver model for Lunar Lake. Like, that's already been disclosed and shown and demoed and whatever. But, and I guess there's this imagination that that'll dovetail really nice with DirectML, but Microsoft's been really busy with, and they have not really shored up DirectML for anything other than...
Yeah, we're at a point now where whether you count it as AI or the hype around AI is expanding so fast that everybody thinks they can have a piece of the pie. So everybody's doing their own thing. There is no consolidation. With DirectX, it came about because all of these graphics companies started folding into each other, and they decided, let's actually unify this and have a unified API that everybody can target. So if I'm a developer, right, if I want to go to Apple, Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, I need 4 times the equivalent development resources than I would normally.
Yeah.
So what do? I pick the one that sells the most or gives me the most potential.
Yeah.
In this market, there's Apple and Intel.
Yeah.
And even if we look, say, will any of this be future compatible for whatever falls out as a standardized interface? I asked Lisa at Computex, so the CEO of AMD, and I asked at what point does this ecosystem need unification, and she turned around. This was like a global press Q&A. You can read it on my blog. She just turned around and said, we're not there yet because the interest is so high and everybody's doing their own thing. They don't see the need for the unification on the developer side, and that's just biting developers in. Number one, get access to the hardware. Number two, learn how to code for it. Everybody's got a different software stack. Everybody's got a different way of interfacing. Some of them, are at the higher level than others. You can talk about, say, using Onyx or TensorFlow or some of these frameworks that are higher level, but you still need the intermediate representation. You still need the compiler. I think one saving grace right now is that if you build for, say, Intel, it will work on all the Intel NPUs because we've only got one NPU or two generations of NPU. We haven't got segmentation there like we may have with. So with GPUs, you optimize for if you have 6 gigs of memory or 8 gigs of memory or 12. We're not there yet with AI.
I think if you think about it from the other side, from the killer application side, I think that a lot of that isn't going to matter yet because whoever is developing the killer application is probably GPU focused already.
And therein lies the CUDA moat as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we when we say AI PC, we talk about Apple, Intel, AMD, Microsoft, and where's the NVIDIA in this? NVIDIA's attitude to AI PC, or at least the concept of consumer-led AI, is you're going to be plugged in, so we're going to support the most powerful plugged-in thing you do. And with the Jensen Q&A at Computex, he was asked this. He was like, well, what about battery life? And his argument was a very old Intel argument from 15 years ago called race to sleep. So you put your GPU in the most inefficient mode possible just to complete the workload the fastest, and that gives you your latency and performance. But where you have like a 40 TOPS NPU, you might have a 400 TOPS GPU in your mobile device. So
it murders the battery.
Yeah.
But, well, I guess the philosophy is normally if it can complete the job really quickly and it's only running for 1 millisecond, then it doesn't really negatively impact your battery. But all of the dreamed up killer use cases we've had so far are always on. And seriously, the most killer application that we've seen in demos is blurred backgrounds on Teams.
On all Windows apps now, the Windows effect, there's eye gaze correction. And window the one that I saw a couple of years ago, which isn't a killer app, but it's a nice to have, is if you're working on your laptop and you turn away to speak to somebody, if you're in the office, it powers down the screen to save battery. And then you look back and it turns it back on again. That is something you can do low power. I think they used to do it with FPGAs, and Intel tried to do it in their GNA or whatever. If you're on battery, the idea is that it actually, over the course of 10 hours, could save you an hour of battery. Yeah. Which makes sense if it's something nice to have.
What if you got a 1 watt screen?
Yeah.
I saw some of those. They're okay.
This one.
That one's a 1.3 watt?
So it's an Intel Evo, so it has to be a 1 watt.
Oh, wow.
That's part of the Intel Evo spec. So this is the Meteor Lake flagship from MSI. I got it when Meteor Lake was launched. I then went to an AMD device and then had to go back to this because I kept having issues. I don't like devices with a discrete GPU.
Asus.
This is ZenBook, yeah. Yeah. And this, the VivoBook, 16-inch Snapdragon X Elite, I got yesterday. So I literally turned it on. It had about half an hour of updates and at least one BIOS reset.
Yeah, it do be like that on Snapdragon.
I've heard worse. So I think this is from the second batch of devices.
Oh, could be, yeah.
So it's not as bad. It did tell me that recall was coming.
Yeah.
It didn't say it was on. It said it was coming.
You have no choice.
But the thing that annoyed me is that I had to sign in. Microsoft has now killed the bypass NRO
Yeah.
way around
Yeah.
installing Windows.
I encountered that myself, and I was just.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
It
You will have a
chokes
cloud
me.
account.
Yeah,
Again, line has to go up.
but as people who test devices, do we really want an email that's attached to 500 notebooks?
Yes. Microsoft would like that because they can go in their dashboard and say, look at all these people.
The average amount of devices per person this year is 6. Next year it's 7. Next year it's 8 because you don't actually remove devices from your account. What a
Yeah.
Technically, you can't have an account if you're under 13.
Yeah.
I actually did have one issue with that because we're at a hotel. You have to log into the hotel Wi-Fi and then sign in.
They didn't plan for that during the sign-up process.
They did. It just took a couple of times, and then it decided to come up with a window saying now log into the hotel Wi-Fi. Before that, it just say can't connect because it couldn't phone home.
It probably could phone home a little bit, like through DNS or something, and it's like, oh, I've got internet. It's like, wait a minute, I don't have all the internet.
Yeah, because all requests get redirected to the hotel's login page.
Yeah.
So, so as far as I've got with this is I've turned it on. The audio. So when you install Windows for the first time and leave it on the install screen like I did while I was doing some other stuff, it starts talking to you for accessibility reasons, right? That audio was a bit crackly.
Well, it hadn't got all its BIOS and driver updates. What do you expect?
The
thing that I'm curious about is if you got the video driver update, because the video driver.
How do I find out?
Just look in Device Manager and check the version.
Remove anything that blocks your camera. I've got the little thing on top that blocks my camera.
Don't show the camera and password. Oh my god.
Oh, I posted on Twitter that I asked Copilot how do I test Snapdragon X Elite devices, and it gave me a video from Gary Explains. So it does go to YouTube. Can't say it's OneDrive.
Did you figure out if that's native or emulation?
What, OneDrive? No. I asked you earlier about Google Drive.
Oh, okay.
I expect OneDrive is native, but Device Manager or DXDiag?
No, well, I would and then display adapters. Yeah. And then
Oh, I do have the 78. It is the lower end SKU.
Driver
513. That's the old one, isn't it?
There's 2 from June.
So this is one of the things that I've been speaking to people about Qualcomm, because they have their units are all with OEM partners like Asus, like HP, like Lenovo. If they push a driver update, it's up to Asus to then push it on the website. So they typically go and validate it and do regression testing. So you'll see some devices that may be on a +2 driver to some others.
There was a lot of teeth. I got a number of reports from inside large OEMs that they were unhappy with the state of the driver as of June 10th.
Yeah, it's
unhappy is in caps and blinking red. Maybe a little bit of dried blood around the typeface.
But so the way the response to Snapdragon has been mixed, and you would say negative, I guess. There was some paid. It seems like there was some paid content initially coming out saying it was great. Snapdragon devices have always had good battery life and good sleep hibernate battery life.
That does actually work well.
Yeah, but they've had that for years. If that was a killer feature that sold stuff, they would have sold more earlier.
Yeah.
And so right now you remember how AMD, when they first launched the Ryzen notebooks, especially first gen and second gen, they were competitive, but they were never in anything special because they never had a good relationship with the OEMs. Then it wasn't until the third and the fourth gen we started seeing some flagships, some design wins. Right, Qualcomm. Oh, so in the first gen, I guess they also had software issues. It took a while to get back into the Windows ecosystem and do that.
The controller was a little sketchy.
Yeah. Qualcomm feels like they're probably about there, except they have the added benefit of Microsoft. I don't want to say forcing, but convincing OEMs to go into 22 flagship devices. So they're in this position where a lot more people have access to the hardware on day one. They're coming under a lot more scrutiny. Microsoft is putting a lot of marketing money behind it. Whether that marketing money actually shows Qualcomm as a brand or Snapdragon as a brand with it. I mean, if you go to a Best Buy today to look for one of these devices, you'll see the Copilot stand with Qualcomm notebooks, but the only reason you know it's got a Qualcomm chip inside is the little sticker on the keyboard.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing any other sort of co-branding on that side.
A warning, if you will.
It's I mean, the Orion chip has good parts to it. The Snapdragon is a brand that they've pushed for gaming for years, and the fact that the systems aren't gaming systems is annoying a lot of people.
Well, I mean, he did dedicate like 3.5 minutes of the presentation to talking about gaming.
Yeah, it's a whack-a-mole event.
If I take the device in a vacuum, I actually wouldn't be unhappy with it. It's not unreasonable. The problems that I have with it is that for the demos and the benchmarks that they showed in Hawaii and before versus what actually launched.
So I have a reason for that.
Not great. But also what you say about Microsoft and the OEMs, very true, very 1.0, very zen, except for Surface. I feel like Microsoft, in their own messaging, had elevated this thing to a far higher level.
Yeah.
And they've got the gall to charge $2,300 for the highest end flagship.
Yeah.
And it is not remotely a flagship device. The $1,000 device, it's not a terrible deal, but it's not going to run games like they promised.
Yeah.
The performance is not really there, and I'm surprised that for where the performance is, that requires 2 fans. If that was basically a fanless machine.
It's one of the things Qualcomm's been criticized on, the fact that there are no TDP numbers here.
Yeah, it's
right.
a little weird.
It's ultimately because they come from the smartphone space, right? It's in the smartphone you never list the TDP of an SoC, right? Whether you've got a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or a mid-range MediaTek or a low-end Samsung Exynos, you all assume it's roughly the same because they're in roughly the similar sort of devices.
Yeah.
But you know the high-end flagship SoCs are going to be consuming like 10 watts on peak.
Yeah.
But if you get a mid-range device, that may max out at 4 watts. But that's not part of the messaging. So it ultimately didn't become part of the messaging for here. Though what Qualcomm had done in the announcement stuff back in their tech summit and was say, look, we have 2 reference type devices, a 23 watt and an 80 watt. Those numbers being the system power, not the SoC power, because they wanted to do it their own way. And
which definitely doesn't add to the confusion.
No. They gave numbers for both. What came out on day one, the 22 systems that they keep talking about, were more in the 20 to 40 watt range.
Yeah.
Right? You may get a device that peaks at 55 momentarily or maintains 45, but nothing up at the 80. So as a result, people are saying, well, this performance isn't what you showed us back in Hawaii.
And that was for an 80 watt part.
Yeah. Yeah. So it then becomes so what should we expect? Now, this means we want a thermally unconstrained, unpower limited device. The dev kit, the mini PC, which should have been launched, what is it now? 12th? It should have been launched a month ago?
It was supposed to launch on the 18th at the latest of June.
Yeah. Yeah, it's now 12th of July.
Yeah.
They had a sign up online, and I signed up. I got an email. I got an email 2 weeks later saying we're still working on it. I honestly think they didn't plan for demand.
I don't think any shipped.
None have.
Yeah.
None have.
I mean,
no, sorry. Some have shipped to developers.
I have a contact that should be like number 3 or 4 in line for our company gets a lot of these for development, and they've gotten 0.
Yeah, I should be getting one as part of the analyst program at Qualcomm. No idea when yet. I may get mine before press samples go out or whatever, just because that's how these things work. So it'll be interesting to see how that experience differs from the mobile devices.
There's a couple developers on the Level 1 forums that have been developing on Windows on ARM for years,
Mm.
and there was a lot of muddy messaging from Microsoft that the Windows 2023 ARM dev kit was going to be applicable.
Mm-hmm.
And not only was it not applicable, but Microsoft didn't ship the same version of
Yeah.
Windows Core for the dev kit as actually shipped, even taking into account GPU differences.
Didn't they even miss like an update cycle or something? Yeah. It's weird because we're in this situation right now where you don't know whether to pin something on Microsoft or Qualcomm.
Oh yeah. Now Microsoft really, I'm surprised the extent Microsoft has thrown Qualcomm under the bus. But Qualcomm is not like the number of staff that you need in place to handle these kind of problems. It would not be my expectation that Qualcomm would do this. And so, like, if in their presentations they're like, we're a scrappy little company that's trying to break into from phones to PCs,
Yeah.
and there's going to be some staffing problems, and there's going to be some parts rough around the edges, but we're working with Microsoft, and it's going to be great. But the messaging, my interpretation of the messaging, which could be entirely a me problem,
Yeah.
was the juggernauts are coming together. Qualcomm's going to do what they're good at. Microsoft's going to do what they're good at on the operating system side, and we're going to knock this out of the park. And it's not.
It turns out the other way.
Yeah.
Well, Qualcomm is traditionally a very conservative company,
Yeah.
right? They
Which is
typically,
usually good.
yeah, it means they want control from soup to nuts or whatever the phrase is, of everything. And it just seems that with this, in order to be first, in order to have 22 launch devices, they've seceded a good amount of control to Microsoft, and Microsoft's basically gone, ha ha.
The developer contacts I have in Microsoft, there's a lot of suffering going on. Now, it could be that they're just disorganized, but they've put in a lot of time.
Yeah.
A lot of time. To the point of unhappiness. like I'm going to have to work another weekend. Sorry, family.
I mean, there are a lot of criticisms, but let's be honest here. The system is a contender. It's spoken about in the same breath as Intel, as AMD, and to a certain extent, Apple, right? You can pick and choose your benchmark but in reality, it is a machine that, broadly speaking, works and is, broadly speaking, competitive on some level. But it's their first generation Orion chip. You can argue it's their 7th generation notebook, but never in the volume of this many OEMs all at once. There are going to be some learnings. I know they've hired a bunch of ex-AMD and ex-Intel people.
That's exciting.
To help steer the ship. Perhaps hired them a bit too late for this cycle, but we will see it in the future. It's Qualcomm's CEO has essentially bet on this because he acquired Nuvia to say we want to go into this market. Before he became CEO, if a new product team didn't deliver good revenue in 3 years, they got canned.
Yeah.
You remember the Centric team, the server team?
Yeah.
They got canned after 3 years, even though they had chips ready to go and be sold. So the fact that this is, what, four years into that now, and this is the first revenue attempt.
If they don't pull back from this, they could have a really powerful product. But I think there's so much of the programming ecosystem that they're going to have to make up. And I don't see Qualcomm being able to do it on their own.
I think part of what would drive that is access. Having a dev cloud, going out there and having a developer community, because it kind of feels like they don't really have one.
Yeah.
Right?
No, they don't. I know some of the developers on our forum, like our forum has kind of become an unofficial landing page for game devs that are chasing down bugs in the Qualcomm driver, at least the June update.
Yeah.
I'm going to boost my gain here a little bit.
Are you a bit low?
Bit low.
It's but yeah, it's we've seen a few Microsoft little hiccups.
How's that, chat?
They care more about the software working than the hardware being performant almost.
Yeah.
So some stuff's been delayed, or obviously had the whole recall issue, and whether that's actually going to come back in any way, shape, or form. That's half.
I saw some really encouraging stuff from Lenovo with these and getting Linux running. Or not.
So sorry, I'm not used to those two words being in the same sentence.
The Linux support on the Qualcomm side with Snapdragon and the GPU support and everything else. They've actually already demoed, I think, working Wayland.
Okay.
And so...
Wait, is it... I've heard that you can't install Linux on these things because the bootloader's locked.
It depends.
I hate that answer.
Yeah, yeah. It's you're not going to get anywhere on Microsoft Surface devices. There are a couple
Okay.
of devices you can get to grub. I don't know if the USB stack is working.
Right.
But Qualcomm actually, there are people inside Qualcomm that are climbing the walls to let us know that there is actually working Linux support, and
Yeah.
they're just, screaming into the void to release it.
I wonder if that's one of the holdups with the dev kit, because they know the dev kit's going to be picked apart more so than the laptops,
Oh, maybe. It's
right?
possible.
Yeah, in that way. So
Certainly that's happened with the GPU driver. Like,
yeah,
normally, like, the change log for a GPU driver is like a page or two, and the last one I think was like 7 or 8 pages. I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to have that. It's fine.
no, I can corroborate.
And so there was a lot. There was a lot that changed, a lot that broke, and that's why some angry, bloodthirsty emails were
Yeah,
deliberately or not leaked.
but and again, it's one of these things that they can push a driver update, but it's up to the OEMs to actually go and validate it for their system and then
Yeah.
push it
Yeah.
live. It's not like you can't just go to the website and download it. Again, that's one of the things that Qualcomm's going to have to grab by the horns and say, no, we're steering the GPU driver deployment.
Yeah, there's also, I mean, there's a little bit of a disconnect in Microsoft because another group that I was sort of talking to, and unofficially, this is all just, none of this is on the record, but yeah, like one of the feeling was that because Microsoft is going to have more control of an ARM-based ecosystem in terms of like, these are the battles that we have fought on Surface, and we are willing to share that with other OEMs like Asus and anybody else, or share it with Qualcomm, who will then disseminate to their partners. That we think that the Windows ecosystem is going to be a much easier supporting proposition in terms of drivers, in terms of kernel mode stuff. One of the specific examples they had was they really hate kernel mode drivers for everything, printers, game copy protection, and there's a couple other examples there. And like we want that to go away because this is why we can't move forward with the Windows kernel. This is why we can't move forward with innovation. This is why we like sleep mode. This is why sleep mode is a problem. Is your game anti-cheat drivers that have to be omniscient on the system.
Yeah, anti-cheat. It's something that's going to take time. The battle from a business standpoint is, will that stop people from buying today? Because
People care.
I look at your video and I actually felt that Linus's unsponsored video was quite fair. He went through some of the plus and the minus points of the system. We're all saying it's going to get better because either it gets better or it dies. And I don't think it's going to die, given what we know about Qualcomm.
I don't know. I'm still salty over my Surface RT purchase.
Hey, you have one. So one thing I'll put to you, because this is something that occurred to me this morning actually during a call. The dev kit for the last generation Snapdragon was Project Volterra, buy it at the Microsoft store. The dev kit for Orion seems to be Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite dev kit as sold by Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Almost as if Microsoft doesn't want to deal with the dev kit anymore.
That's wild, but yeah.
It means Qualcomm's going to be the one to steer that.
Well, I don't know if Qualcomm was ready to steer that. If they were, a teenager learning to drive a car, they have hit an embankment. Probably recoverable, but
are they still
annoying.
upright?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's pivot to this Intel stuff.
Okay.
The stability and the...
Oh yeah, that's fun.
So funny thing, if you've probably all seen the Wendell video on Intel stability, common friends are saying, "Oh, have you seen how it's gone up today? And have you seen who's commenting on it?" And Wendell's like,
Yeah, I don't
care.
Whatever. Yeah. I'm janitoring. I'm bringing you along on a janitorial task.
Yeah.
And it's not normal that I'm also having because when you work on these kinds of projects, you have a little bit of a bedside manner. You're a doctor, you're diagnosing a patient. There's a lot of anger right now. A lot of anger because It's like this was supposed to be fixed when we moved from 13th to 14th gen. Why is 14th gen still not stable in these scenarios? I don't understand. And that's on like the game side of it. It's like there is a lot you can blame on individuals, but then it was like, wait a minute, what about in the server context? Because you don't normally run gaming like, but you kind of do sometimes.
Well, yeah. So there are a couple of things from your video I just want to pull out, and if you haven't seen it, keep watching, but watch it afterwards. The two things were the proliferation of consumer grade hardware in the enterprise, not the data center, in the enterprise, and the fact that you were able to get 2 game studios to hand you a database of error reports, which I would assume be under lock and key. But if
there's definitely lots of personally identifiable information in there, lots and lots and lots.
So you've signed GDPR then?
Yeah, I do not have. I don't have a copy of it, but I can remote into a system that has access, which is presumably monitored and logged.
Yes, but
and then also have access to systems which have been sanitized.
I can only imagine, not because you're an amazing human being that you wouldn't get access, but they're so frustrated at the level of some of this that because since you posted, even today, there were tweets from Wargaming.
Yeah.
Warframe.
Warframe people were like, oh yeah, checking our crash database, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I think also to a certain level, it's also making people realize we need to log a lot more.
I saw Alderon Games, who I've also worked with before, they tweeted and they're like, yeah, this is what we're facing with our internal stuff. And who's the other one? There was another game company that posted, and the literal, it was on Twitter, and the literal text of it was, oh yeah, we didn't think that we should probably organize crashes by machine. No one thinks to do that. And and a lot of the time these databases also don't go back more than like 3 months, because
you don't need to keep all the data, especially old version.
Yeah, if you didn't fix it in 3 months, like, how useful is this? And so they started doing that kind of analytics, and was like, oh crap, there's something going on here.
Do these people employ data scientists? No. So they don't. They have a database of data, but they don't know how to organize the database of data.
The database of data is organized for developers that are hunting normal bugs, not bugs that.
Also, something in Jira.
Yeah. I mean, it's grouped by, like, this is an NVIDIA GPU driver version. They're hardened to that. But it's not hardened to other kind. I mean, even the telemetry from the tool doesn't always report the correct GPU, because systems have more than one GPU.
Or the correct CPU, and you'd think that if something, because they're hunting software bugs, right, not hardware bugs. If you're hunting down a hardware bug, you'd want the motherboard model, you'd want the BIOS version, you'd want what memory is in there, and even down to what batch of the ICs on the memory are on there, what Wi-Fi is being used, what Ethernet is being used, what chipset is being used, and
we mostly don't get that.
For as much as we've been saying, especially in the last few years, that the future needs to be combination hardware and software co-developed, we still have hardware people and we still have software people, and never the twain shall meet.
No, and it'll end up being, there's a lot of possible solutions that have been floated that I don't think that ultimately may apply a little bit, but probably ultimately are a little bit of a red herring, like the RADV game tools. Stuff triggering certain kinds of errors. It's like, okay, well, if this tool only triggers it in this, then do something different. And those people don't realize that there have been lots of actual hardware bugs that were, quote unquote, unsolvable in hardware, but microcode can deal with a lot of those situations. It's like, this sequence of instructions, don't do this. Insert an extra NOP, insert an extra,
You mean catch and don't halt. Catch, halt and don't catch fire.
Yeah. And so the microcode like, I alluded to this in the video, but like the Pentium FOOF bug, they had to replace a lot of CPUs, like a lot.
Yeah.
And that is the whole reason that microcode came about, is Intel had an internal team. This is a story that was relayed to me. Was when that happened, it was like, how can we do something so this never happens again?
Net,
and that gave rise to microcode,
which ARM CPUs don't have, if I remember correctly. So different ways to sort of catch these things. But in terms of the errors, all the databases you've seen, the errors happen on the Ks, the KFs, the regulars.
Yeah, no letters.
Even on the no letter ones.
We don't have a lot of data on the no letter ones. Mostly it's from the gaming side. The data was so noisy on the gamer side
Yeah.
that's when I sort of was like, okay, I need to go in a different direction with this. And it occurred to me, wait a minute, they also have game servers, and I'm getting telemetry from game servers because some of the crashes were inconsistencies between client and server.
Yep.
And they actually had that set up to log. And the reason they had it set up that way is anti-cheat, because people would get banned and then be like, that's not fair. And then sometimes they would dig into it and try to figure out what happened. And sometimes that's legit. Like sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't have banned this person. Yeah. This was a weird condition that, but that's when the client and server are desynced.
Yeah, mismatch.
And so that, and the server population is a much different set of CPUs.
But it's never a proper representation of what's in the market.
No.
And we were talking about this earlier. What percentage of the CPUs in your databases were Ks and KFs?
A lot of them.
Yeah.
The vast majority are a gamer type overclockable. Even the server CPUs, even though they're not being used outside of spec, and some of them were being used under spec, like with a limited multiplier. Because
or power limit for...
Yeah, the 14th gen CPUs had replaced 13th gen, and they didn't bother reconfiguring the 54 multiplier limit.
Yeah.
So, but that actually was useful, because in the log data, it was like the hottest hotspot across all of the CPUs is only 83C.
Yeah.
So it's like, heat. And then I've got a very small data set. It's tiny. It's only 50 machines thereabouts. Like it's 48 or 52. 13700T.
The 35 watts.
Yeah.
So it's happening on. So it's not a function of the power of the chip.
It's at a lower rate though.
So it may be as a function of the power of the chip, but it may be something fundamental.
But it's also a fundamentally different data set, and it's also a different use case. And that is a different company than the other companies. I just got that contact like a couple of days ago. So I'm still looking at that. But I gave them some stuff to run, and their guys are good, so I'm already starting to get data back.
Okay, cool. It's but yeah, if we look at how many CPUs are sold for each generation, the data you've got is a bad reflection.
Yeah.
Bad. But just like the Steam survey is in no way indicative of what's actually selling.
No, but it is indicative of a lot of human suffering.
Or Chinese bots.
Could be. A lot of Chinese bot suffering. That's fine. I'll take it.
Yeah. If that was massive spikes on the 2060.
Yeah. Well, and there's also there's survivorship bias here too, especially from the game crash data, because if the game crashes really badly, you're not going to get any telemetry from that, or the operating system, or a blue screen, or whatever.
Yeah, it's true. Or if something comes in and takes control.
Yeah.
So, what's next on this story? Is it just looking at more data? Is it possible to pinpoint what is happening?
I have there are in the data that I put together, I grouped 13th and 14th gen because from the data center, so not initially but later, because in the data center I was seeing enough of similarities between 13th and 14th gen that you could tell there's something that ain't right. And
we think it's something fundamental to the design or the operation, or is this something that can be fixed in firmware? We don't know yet. That's
we don't know. Well, so in taking the systems, so understand that when I say that a system has an error, it doesn't mean that it's unusable. In fact, I think that at least half, maybe 2/3 of the CPUs that I've identified as something ain't right with them, if you were using it in a desktop use case, you probably wouldn't know.
No, you'd never hit the environment where...
Yeah, exactly.
So, a gaming environment is, heavy on the PCIe.
Yep.
It's usually, strong on the memory as well.
Yep.
CPU, it depends on the game, obviously.
Yep.
But at least one thread will be, jacked up. And so with the FOOF bug and with the FDiv bug as well, that's something that was eventually narrowed down to a fundamental design issue that wasn't detected during validation, test and validation. We still don't know whether it's not the software that's running on the chip. It's either the firmware or the design.
There is some percentage of chips that have gotten into such a bad state they are going to have to be replaced. It is unavoidable. The question is, what percentage is that?
And there's no way this could be radiation causing crap or One thing a lot of people don't really realize is that modern processors have what are called chicken bits. Things that you can turn on or off, and they might even be fused. So if there's a feature that needs to be disabled permanently from a chip because there's a defect in the silicon, you flip a chicken bit, blow a fuse, and then that path is no longer taken.
Technically, ETVB could be considered a chicken bit because it's literally just a mailbox that's only one bit.
Yeah.
And it's on or off, and it's like, did the motherboard maker turn that on or off? Those are contributing factors for sure, but not everything that we're talking about. There's undocumented ones too.
Yes, yeah, tons of undocumented stuff in every processor. But in terms of motherboard correlation, you've seen Asus and Supermicro W680s.
Yeah, it's important to understand W680 tends to be more conservative. That does not mean that
it was built to be more conservative.
Yeah, but there's a lot of I've seen a lot of comments that are like, oh my gosh, because it's W680, it is definitely running within an Intel spec. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the W680, like, it physically cannot deliver the wattage, but also generally tends to be built more conservatively. And we know from temperature logs, 83 CE max temperature in one of the populations. Ergo.
Yeah. If my CPU never went above 83C, I'd love it.
Yeah. You're going to leave some performance on the table, but also, I mean, this is maybe something else I want to do another video on, is as we've gone into this thing in the data center where the power requirements are insane, there's a lot of empty space in old data centers, and you can actually get a lot of mileage from...
Empty space or power budget?
There's no power budget.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, and like a 7900 65 watt, it's a really good use case for your lack of power in the data center. You can get a lot of those systems out of 22 kilowatts.
Yeah. I mean, a general comment about data centers in general is that they tend to be power limited, not space limited these days.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that's why some of these data center contacts are just like, we like these systems a lot more when they're on a 680 motherboard with a multiplier limit of 53, and we never see the CPU temperature exceed 80.
But I forgot the space. They can be 2U's, not 1U, and have better cooling.
Yeah.
So there's, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of little elements of the mystery here, and there does seem to be slight behavioral differences in terms of degradation over time when we're talking between 13th and 14th generation.
So is this a degradation or is this an error?
Well, so
because
if it's a programming error that leads to electromigration, then the degradation is a result of a programming error.
But you're not sure if any of these issues are due to degradation.
I'm 85% sure that at least a double-digit percentage part of the population is degraded.
And that's, the point I'm trying to determine is degradation on a standard scale happens, but not in a sufficiently fast enough way to affect most people.
Yes.
So if there is an error or an issue in the design causing accelerated electromigration in something specific that's causing these errors, it's
that could very well be
the same way that any company, when they've got a new device, they do rapid longevity testing.
Yep.
Right. They try to make the device experience 5 years of use within a week.
Yep.
By accelerated thermals or whatever. So if this is causing that, then I can see it.
We accidentally fed the CPU 1.7 volts all the time. I'd believe that for W790 or W690, but it's a lot harder to do that on W680.
Well, don't forget these processors also have a lot of internal voltage regulation, the DVLOs or the IVRs.
Yeah, that's true.
That changes a little bit with Lunar Lake.
Yeah.
But so that if that's something fundamental with like these MIM caps and but you've seen 13th and 14th. Didn't you say you also saw a little bit of 12th issue?
There are enough, so whenever you've got a bazillion data points like this, and you just look at the OODL decompression errors, even though there's not a huge number of individual systems, you will see AMD systems, you will see 12th gen, you will see, I think it was a...
7th gen?
There aren't 7th gen, there's maybe... It's a 90, I think it was a 9750H, which had 11 errors for the time window that I was looking at. for all the other criteria.
Yeah.
That was the next most, like, it was like
populous.
13, 14, 9750H. And it's like,
didn't you also tell me saying it had an error for every 2 hours?
yeah, there's a couple in there that's just like every 2 hours of playtime somebody has experienced an error, and it's just like that person is not going to be playing this game very much longer. This is wild.
But I was using a 6950X system until a couple of months ago, so people do keep systems for 8 years or longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I hope we're not to a point where desktop CPUs are only engineered to last a couple of years. That's just I don't want to be in that world.
Did you see any Meteor Lakes?
I tried to exclude all the mobile processors.
Oh.
And I tried to exclude all the mobile variants because there was a lot of noise from like a 13900H. Is that the mobile variant?
Yeah.
There was a lot of noise from those.
Well, so some of the mobile variants are desktop ones rebranded, and some of them are actually mobile-based chips.
There's a lot of data in there for that kind of stuff, so we could probably tease that out. But there's not. I mean, when I find something, I want like thousands of data points.
Yeah, it's because when I think the future processors coming down the line, Luna is mobile-based for a specific power band. And then what's after that? Arrow, and we expect that to come to desktop. And isn't Arrow based on a Meteor Lake-like design but expanded to fill? So something like that. So
the socket looks fancier.
3D, we're using 3D packaging as well for Overos, and maybe that, maybe the change in manufacturing introduces.
Packaging worries me because packaging inherently is fairly temperature sensitive.
It can be. It's when we get into the future beyond FinFET, gate all-around FETs to fork sheets and complementary FETs. That's why it even gets worse in the manufacturing side. So
it blew my mind when I learned that we don't do 15,000 RPM hard drives anymore because there's too much sinusoidal wobble at the edge of the disk.
Even in helium.
Yeah. It's like 15. Oh no, you can do it with a tiny glass platter, but nothing else.
Yeah.
It's all right.
It'd be interesting to see if how much mobile affects that, because I'm sure mobile processors have a lot greater thermal swing.
Yeah, and a lot, probably a lot crashier.
In my experience. Yeah. Or those on integrated graphics versus discrete graphics.
Yeah.
Because you got an on-chip versus a big thermal thing right next to it or whatever.
I'm not really sure that we didn't end up with some mobile systems in the data sets because
misrecognition of.
Yeah, and there definitely were some people that were running a big hunkin' GPU on a very anemic CPU that may have been a Thunderbolt dock or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
I had my favorite tech support ticket, and they okayed me sharing this. Don't be this guy. It's like, your game sucks. This is almost an exact quote. Your game sucks. If I run it in compatibility mode, it's fine. Just fix the game. You need to figure out why this is crashing. And it 100% was CPU degradation. And the reason it works in compatibility mode is because you don't get any AVX instructions.
Okay.
And he's like, it works, fix that in your game. I don't want to give up. It's like, you're going to have to downclock your CPU a little bit. I don't want to do that. That was in the ticket. Like, I don't want to do that. It's like, don't be that guy.
What's the most misconfigured system you've sent to the Steam survey? Dual Bergamo? With like a GT 730.
Those Hygon systems I sent to the Steam survey.
But for anybody who doesn't know, that's the AMD Zen 1 joint venture chip that they did for China with the cut down random number generator and the different crypto engines. But that was only one generation, and Did the government ever contact you about having those?
No.
He wasn't supposed to have them.
No, not supposed to have those. It's cool. It's fine. We don't talk about that. It's fine. You just you can't use them for anything. Like, you can't. There's some, like, there's forms you fill out, and then it's just like, did you use any of this forbidden equipment in fulfilling the contract? And it's like, no.
Or in nuclear research or weapons research.
Yeah, do you have any of this equipment in operation on premises? No, it's not in operation on premises. They're just they're being analyzed over in the corner. It's fine. It's fine.
I think the most weirdest one I've done was a centaur.
Centaur halls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the one that wasn't released.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, that would be a good one to get your hands on for a collection. I have some very generous benefactors that have amazing stuff in their collection that we borrow from time to time. And
Mine's in a box.
yeah. Yeah, it's wild stuff.
I find it easier to get CPUs than motherboards.
Yeah, it's
which is
usually
annoying.
Well, motherboards don't. I still have a slot A processor or two, but getting a working slot A motherboard is a bit of a challenge.
I'm sure somebody still has one in their closet.
Yeah, but
they can ping it. They just don't know where it is.
They almost always know, or they almost always have bad capacitors. So it's like,
do you want to go through? Yeah, replacing them. Yeah. Oh, so.
Yeah, fun time. Any questions, chat? You've all been so patient.
Let's move on to the Q&A. I did get. I will call out a couple of super chats because if you hadn't realised, Wendell's streaming this, but also I'm streaming this.
Yeah, I got a bunch too, and thank you. And I don't know how to go back and see them now.
Are you not in the? Yeah, you're not logged into Studio.
Yeah.
So I'll go through mine. A couple of bucks from George at Chips and Cheese. Dude, don't need to send money over YouTube. Come on. He says writing articles for NPUs is a pain in the butt.
I would agree with that.
It's one of the things that I constantly talk to all the companies I work with. It's benchmarking NPUs. There is no standardized benchmarking suite because A, all the APIs are different. B, nobody support between them can be a bit flaky. And then nobody's decided on what makes the best benchmark. It's people talk about tokens per second or performance per watt, but then you realize they're running the 4-bit quantized model, but they don't natively support 4-bit. They're just doing that to save memory bandwidth and ballooning the data. But then also the Q4_0 model, which is the one that has the least accuracy because it's prunes the most, so it doesn't do the most compute. So if you were to have like an accuracy test, it would hit like 30%, not the 70% you need to actually be relevant. So that's what's annoying me right now. I did learn of some software this week called LM Studio.
Yes, that is fantastic.
Which you can pull models out of Hugging Face, and it will just run them, and you don't need to know Python. You don't need to know any of that. It will just run it on your system. Some of the downloads are sizable because LLM models are sizable. Anything from 3 gigs to 8 gigs. I think LM Studio has the potential to offer have a benchmark script around it. Yeah. If you can choose something that's consistent, it allows for CPU and GPU optimization. I saw it running an NPU workload, so that could be on the cards.
I've used it before, but I've never used it with an NPU. I wasn't aware that it could actually do that.
Yeah, I saw it on the NPU, but that may be somebody's private Hugging Face model.
Oh.
So it's only version 0.2 of the software, so it's clearly still in the works, but that has potential. While Wendell's still logging in, $2 from our friend Gordon over at PC World.
Hey Gordon, thank you. I saw you retweeted my shenanigans. Thank you. I didn't have to do that.
It's wait.
I'm still learning. I don't know what I'm doing.
It's I can't wait to meet up with Gordon again. It's been way too long.
Yes.
And glad to hear you're feeling better, dude. He says, is Cinebench even less useful in the ARM x86 world? I'd say Cinebench was never used. For mobile, it's a completely useless test. For workstation and enterprise, for workstation, it's a good test. The problem I find is that Cinebench doesn't test the front end of a CPU.
Yeah.
So people use it as a workload generator, but it's not testing the whole CPU. So you tend to leave on a 170 watt processor a good 20 watts on the table.
Yeah.
With Cinebench, just because of the way it works.
How do I load data in and out of the CPU fast enough? Sometimes it's misleading because Cinebench is able to just live on the CPU, and that's not always useful.
It's also the instruction list that Cinebench processes is very basic. Go do vector op, go do vector op, go do vector op, go do vector op. it's not branching. It's not, it's not filling up the caches as it needs to. So it's a number in the sand. It doesn't mean much. Though bigger number better.
Yeah, I mean it's not useless, but it's just not, doesn't tell you the whole story.
From a single-threaded perspective, does it say much?
No, not really.
Mm.
I mean, you got. I'm sure. Well, I mean, because the whole AVX 512 thing, it's like, look, it's amazing. It's like, it's an AVX 512 test.
Yeah. Wire Rope sends over $4.99. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you guys heard anything about Battle Mage? Thanks for the stream and the elevators. Do we have elevators going up and down behind us?
We do. There's elevators behind us. That's my elevator pitch to watch and subscribe.
So Battle Mage, or Battle Mage is the desktop variant of XE2 graphics. XE2 graphics will be on Lunar Lake, and they're promising big improvements in performance and performance per watt. If you want to get hands-on to what the XE2 graphics architecture is like, there was disclosures at Computex. I didn't end up writing anything just because I don't typically do the GPU stuff. I think George maybe at Chips and Cheese has done some stuff. If not, it may be in the works. But if you want to understand a little about what's happening with Battle Mage behind the scenes, things like VVC support, H.266 and whatever, go look at the disclosures from Computex and we'll see it.
Vinny2142, thank you for the thing. I'm trying to scroll backwards, but it won't let me. I'm so sorry.
Are you in studio?
No, I mean, let's see.
You have to. Actually, no. You should go content and then live.
You can tell I do this a lot, chat.
Live at the top. You should be able to enter that stream. No, you might need to move the mouse over it, actually, because then it fires up the buttons on the side. No, the live button there. No. Yep.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
And it turns out I actually can't use a touchscreen on YouTube.
And
that's amazing.
Yeah, viewer activity.
All right.
Yeah.
Bedgkin, thank you. Dirk Gently, thank you. And Vinny, I got Vinny. All right. Thank you.
Do they ask any questions?
What are the chances that 13-14-600K will have a shorter longevity and or eventually start having stability issues? I don't know. That's going to require a root cause analysis. And I feel like Intel is going to have to come out and say, we think this is the issue. Right now, the messaging from Intel has been, this is totally a board partner thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was originally convinced of that. I'm no longer convinced of that.
So, but you said earlier today that Intel's updated their statement.
I think they did today.
Yeah. So initially,
but initially it was like that.
Wasn't it? Initially, it said they were looking into issues with 13th gen, and they've now included 14th gen in it.
Yes.
That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. But in terms of i9 versus i7 versus i5.
It does seem like there is something to the component of the i9 is more likely to encounter an issue versus i7, but it doesn't mean that you're immune.
So by that logic, i5, this is taking into account this is dividing by the frequency of.
I'm thinking in terms of TDP, but yeah.
Yeah, if your database had more i9s, you'd see more i9 errors. That's what I'm saying.
That's true. Yeah, and it definitely does have more i9s than i7s.
So errors per CPU.
Errors
if
per
you were to
CPU
normalize it,
it's going to be higher.
It's still higher on the i9.
On 13.
Okay, on i9 13, then i7, then i5. If you're just taking 13.
Yeah, I think it's i9 followed by i9 14 followed by i7 13 followed by i7 14.
The Wargaming blog post has some interesting numbers. Has a good pie chart.
Check out their pie chart, because I have a feeling that's going to line up pretty close with what I have. Ivar says, I wonder if you guys will face any repercussions from Intel for bringing this information public. Oh yeah, no, it's some of the game companies that have done the reporting are mitigating denial of service attacks, which is like, why are you that much of an Intel fan person that you're going to denial of service attack a game company? Like, really? Okay.
I get paid by some of these companies, and I'm not a fanboy, so why the hell are you?
It's wild. Um, one of the corporate contacts supposed out loud that they might have a harder time getting replacement CPUs because like the impression that I got, don't know, they didn't say this in as many words, but the impression that I got was, all right, here, have a couple trays of CPUs. Good luck.
Yeah, you're on your own now.
Yeah.
Our friend Brayathorn, sorry, I keep touching my mic, sends over $5. Says, hello, Dr. Ian and Wendell. It's been a while since I met you both at LTX. Do you think we can collectively pressure Linus Media Group to have another event in 2025?
Listen, as long as they can make some money, or at least break even, I think they'd be down for it. I think that would probably work fine.
And it not be a massive strain. It's
Yeah.
that was always a common theme with those events. Everybody in the company would have to get up and contribute to it on top of the normal work.
I think if Linus knew an event management company that he trusted to get it done and was like amazing, he would just have the event planning company do it.
Yeah.
But it's not what you know, it's who you know, and like how does that work?
The thing is, event planning companies, they'll have their preferred audio, AV team, and I'm not sure if you've hired an AV team.
Yeah.
They're mega expensive because they carry everything in massive crates, and it's
Linux Gemini asks, so when do we go to power a System 390X? ARM might make more inroads in the Linux side. I think that there's a lot of people that are really excited by ARM in the same way that a lot of people are excited by RISC-V. It's not really what it is, it's really the promise of it. Like when you actually break down and try to use RISC-V for some of these things, like I think Framework is coming out with a RISC-V board for their laptop or something maybe. Somebody is doing it's not Framework.
no, it's Deep Computing.
Deep Computing.
They just announced their Roma DS2 RISC-V system. It's about $3,000.
Yeah.
It's a dev kit.
It's not remotely practical for anything. Like you can be excited about RISC-V all you want, but it is not remotely practical for anything. You can get one, you can use it, you can build a little home NAS out of it, you can have a nice little low power system. I'm running Debian and checking emails on the one that I have. It is great, it's fantastic, it's a fun little toy. It is not useful for things that you have to get done.
It's I have the old Sci-Fi dev kit. I took it out to take a photo of it and put it back in its anti-static wrapper, and it's still sitting on my shelf. They have since released another one. It is Deep Computing doing the RISC-V mainboard for Framework. One of their reps or VPs is actually based in London, so I might have to turn around and say, "Oi, can I have a play with the system?"
There's a lot of people that are irrationally excited about RISC-V, and I get it. You need to, you're just choking over here on the x86 fumes, and you just want something but it's not there yet. We need out of order execution. We need memory prefetch. There's a lot of stuff that we need.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
the RISC-V profiles are being ratified this year, and that's what's going to standardize some of these things. I mean, you can standardize around an ISA, but everybody does custom stuff on top of that. And the whole point about profiles is that it, puts some of that into, but Deep Computing is the one that's doing a big consumer push. I'm kind of hoping that the Tens Torrent, who's doing a high-powered RISC-V chip for the data center, maybe we can convince them to do a dev kit. They're doing a dev kit for their AI chips.
Yeah.
So I helped push them to do that.
Google was wildly successful beyond their hopes and dreams with the Coral accelerator, to the point that devs got tired of waiting for it.
Yeah, they still sell it. But it's TPU V1, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the old stuff.
Yeah.
So
but there are developers. Arguably, there's more development going on for that Coral accelerator than there is for any NPU right now, which is depressing.
Also, Coral's been out for a few years. It's the
momentum.
ZKS string of numbers, not name and bunch numbers, but just random string, sends over $10. Thank you, saying, how's Zen 5 Tech Day going?
What?
We're in Paris.
Yeah.
Samsung?
What are you talking about? Hello?
Anyway.
Risk 5. Wait, Alderon Matt's here. I wonder how bad Intel CPU failures have to be for Intel CPU makers, or for CPU makers to give longer warranty than a 1-year limited warranty. A lot of people are mentioning that they're getting replacements denied. I think Intel, they've already got the answer in the framework for this. Remember the OC? You could to like $20, no questions asked. Just do that. It's like, all right, you're out of warranty. We don't know what happened.
They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I know. They should. That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like they should bring that back as one time.
I think it was $50. And yeah, I've seen some returns be denied for such stupid reasons. I've also seen some hell bashed CPUs be replaced with no worries. So
it's like, there's a bullet hole in the CPU. What did you do?
Well, somebody's clamped it down too tight for sub-zero overclocking. So just watching YouTube has sent over a couple of bucks and says, what event are you at and where is it? Told you, we're in Paris.
Ben Murphy asks, with everything going on with Intel x86 chips, do you think that we may get some more move to ARM for consumers, and how is ARM better for Linux versus x86? Nothing is there yet, but ARM seems to have lit a fire under the ass of both Intel, Lunar Lake, and AMD, unannounced coming products. So we'll see.
So Crypto CS Guy sends over £2. Thank you. Says Intel, AMD, and Nvidia should make their own games. You have the tool makers and you have the users of the tools. When the tool maker uses their own tools, sometimes there's an issue.
Eusphoro says, fancy seeing you here, and sent $500 because he's a crazy person.
The fuck?
Thank you. How's it going?
Yeah.
Did you get your GPU pass-through going? Hopefully that's all good.
Do we have to do the $500 dance now? Is that what streamers do?
The shirt's not coming off.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, definitely not.
I think I have some GPUs that are waiting on me back at the office that are of the variety that they were having trouble with in GPU pass-through, because of course they fixed it. They fixed it with the registry. And
I've practically spent 7 weeks on the road, so I can't do that. I'm gonna be home for a little bit before hot chips. So
I don't envy you the travel that you do.
Yeah,
it is a crazy travel.
Crispy Silicon, good to see you, Crispy. Sends over $5. Thank you. Says, what's a few amps on a hot day when you're already way out of the meat of the voltage frequency curve?
What?
Because of the i9Ks and KFs, you're so far out of the optimal point of the voltage frequency curve. What's a few extra amps? There is a thing called the elastic breakpoint.
I think we might have found the Asus engineer in the audience.
Oh, actually, I know who he works for. So
Asus was definitely playing it a little fast and loose, even on the W680 motherboards. But I think that even though they were playing it fast and loose, it seemed not to matter because Supermicro and ASRock were working within spec. I don't have enough ASRock motherboards that I really feel comfortable being like, yeah, ASRock, but so far it lines up.
I reviewed motherboards almost exclusively for 5-6 years, before then adding in CPUs and then focusing pure on the CPUs. And I felt over those 6 years that motherboard makers were getting a better grip on reality.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, the 4 main vendors are all Taiwanese companies. And if you're a Westerner in a Taiwanese company, it's often hard to go up the chain, especially if you're in Taiwan. If you're in the satellite office, you have limited power anyway. But it felt like it was getting better and getting better and getting better. I've been long enough outside of the motherboard discussion at those companies that there's a hole in me somewhere because I don't know. And part of me wants to know, and because on some levels there's been regression. And I'm not sure whether this is a cultural thing, whether it's a Taiwanese company not understanding what a Western audience wants or what a general enthusiast wants. I mean, the amount of executives in the gaming industry or in the hardware industry that promotes gaming, who when I ask, what game do you play? And they go, oh no, my son does that. Really infuriates me.
I live vicariously through my offspring in order to determine the direction of this industry.
I met one executive who enjoys Final Fantasy, and so now he's my best friend. I've told him, if you guys ever do organize a trip to see your friends at Square Enix, I will have I'll be sitting on the pilot's lap with my nose up against the screen, going, Square. And he's like, yeah, let's make that happen.
Bedchkin, thank you. I won the Silicon Lottery with my 7950X. How long do you think the CPU will be enough? When to replace, if you could see into the future?
I used a system for 8 years and only replaced it 2 months ago. It was an Intel 6th gen Broadwell, 10 core. There's a high-end desktop, okay, so 4 channels and some PCI lanes. I used that for 8 years. I replaced it with an AMD Threadripper, and when you name your PC, when you install Windows or whatever, I called it Broadwell. And that system, the CPU stayed the same. The cooler changed a few times because I hate CLCs, because they always break and they never seem to work. And
on an 8-year time scale, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I accidentally leave the plastic on. The GPU went from I think at the time, a 770 all the way up to a 4090. Now, you could say that's a really unbalanced system, but I still put new ones in because I went into video editing and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it came a point where it was my OS was so trashed after 8 years and so many random installs everywhere, I bit the bullet and changed. So any good, decent system will last. I'm always an advocate for when you upgrade one thing to the best. Don't go mediocre and upgrade a bunch of things. Now, obviously with CPU, memory, and motherboard, that can be difficult because those are very sizable all at the same time. But what did he say he had?
7950X.
7950X, so you've probably got a top-end motherboard, you've probably got a good amount of memory. It will support, up to 192 gigs if you really wanted. And you've got PCIe 5 storage. I mean, to be honest, with a system like that, the thing I worry about is running out of PCIe lanes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, a good, 4 years at a minimum, that will last you. As I've got older, I don't care about chasing the 1%.
No.
I want stability.
I probably wouldn't.
So I would run that at 75 watts.
I probably wouldn't go to the next generation. If there's massive single thread performance improvement or some sort of change in the way that the platform works in order to lower latency, then I might upgrade sooner. But yeah, I think you're going to get at least 3 or 4. The very last AM5 CPU you can buy would probably be the upgrade to go for that system, especially if you got a higher end motherboard.
Yeah, it's if you want to keep the motherboard, right?
Yeah.
I've got a feeling that the way that AMD's handled the AM4 stuff, and they're still launching AM4 CPUs for it, right? AM4 was DDR4, AM5 is DDR5. You can only kind of throw a dart on the dartboard and say the next time they will update that socket is for DDR6.
Probably, yeah. I have 2 kind of related questions. Watched the GN video. It was interesting to know that consumer level PC parts are being used as game servers. Yes, no. W680 CPU, and how valid is AAA game devs complaining about server costs killing online games? And then Linux Gemini also. It's going to backtrack a little. Using desktop SKUs in the data center, corps like Hetzner have been doing this for a while now. So I guess you could contact them. They may have already contacted me. Did you ever think about that? Yeah.
What is it? 90% of what we do is always behind the scenes, pretty much.
Yeah. It's not. So it is, but it isn't, because single thread performance. I can't think of a single Xeon SKU that is going to offer more than 80% of what you would get from a 14900, even locked at 56.
I mean, you buy a Xeon because you want ECC. RDIMMs.
Well, you get ECC non-RDIMMs on W680.
Yeah. And then, but also the management, the RAS features that come with that.
You get that on W680 as well.
Do you?
Yeah.
Is it enabled on the CPU?
Oh yeah. It's new since Alder Lake. That was
Okay.
They didn't used to do that. It used to only be the i3, which I thought was a paradox.
Yeah.
And now they're like W680, which is fantastic because I think it helps expose whatever this issue is.
Yeah, you don't tend to get the same level of support.
Yeah, that's true.
From your OEM, from the whoever's selling you the server, because they don't get the same margins on it.
Yeah. Xeon is way higher margin, and that's part of also what drives this is because if you were to buy the equivalent Xeon, it's probably going to be $1,200, $2,000.
So the question is, why the reason that game developers are buying these rather than Xeons isn't because of the price. It's because of the speed.
And also reduced blast radius is what I was explicitly told. Meaning that they will run 2 to 4 dedicated servers on a single box.
Okay.
And it is more economic in terms of power, data center density, IP address, denial of service, just like DDoS.
I guess that's the one thing that... wait, do W680 boards have IPMI? The Asus and the Supermicro one does.
Asus, Supermicro, and
ASRock. Okay. Because that, in previous generations, that was a bit hit and miss.
It probably still is a little bit. I've got a lot more experience with AM4 and AM5 where they bolted on IPMI and things like you needed a kernel module in order to forward ECC errors from the kernel to the IPMI. There was no... Normally, the system management controller has a module for that. They didn't bother with that on AM4, and I don't think they've bothered with that on AM5.
Yeah, because there was one tie-in board that supported IPMI on AM4. It's proliferated a bit more on AM5, but by demand.
Well, I was freaking out in 2023 at Computex because it was like AM5 was launching. It's like, fellas, where my board's at? And ASRock Rack was the only people that had a board. And I bought one of those boards on day one availability.
Yeah.
And like ECC did not work correctly until December of last year. Like, yeah, it was wild times. And then this year at Computex, even like Quanta is making reference AM5 boards. Like everybody is making AM5.
That may be because Quanta's now flush with money. due to a little green company worth $3 trillion.
Everybody's making AM5. Ike asks, would you make a video on your background, education, why you got into computing, earlier jobs, etc.? Dr. Cutress made one on his transition from academia to what he does now, and I would love to watch and be inspired. It's nothing special. I've just been stumbling around janitorial computer tasks for a long time. Sysadmin. But I tend not to let anything go. And like, I will root cause this. I will find the problem.
Yeah. Update on my side, my undergraduate university is shutting down the department I was in.
Oh yeah, you sent me that. That was disappointing.
Yeah, that's literally happened in the last 2 weeks. There's not been an official announcement, but I sent a, not a strong email, but a passionate email to the Vice-Chancellor and the Dean, and I got one back that was boilerplate and copy-paste, which is kind of crappy. So I went in the chemistry department. The computer science department at that university is having their 50th anniversary celebrations this year, about the same time that the chemistry department is being shut down. So I've been toying with an idea of doing a video about the department. If it doesn't ultimately help, at least it's some sort of in remembrance for it. And yeah, that I may take I may go up to the university for a few days and speak to the staff that are still there that I remember. It's yeah, the reason is the university is trying to save £23 million over 2 years. And
what a great reason to shut down the higher education.
So where I went was like, it's now rated the 4th best chemistry department in the UK for overall ratings, and by ratings that's teaching and research and outreach. So they're 4th rated but they still can't. The interest for chemistry students apparently in the UK has died down in the last 20 years, or at least since I did it, which is a shame. I'm not sure whether that's because there's a draw for computer science, there's more money in computer science now, or just general STEM, or just the lack of chemistry teaching. It's where I did my postgrad, they interacted with industry, and industry paid something like 30 million for a bunch of new buildings. And in order to pay for that, the investors own half the IP for like the next 30 years as well. So there's a trade-off there, and so I don't know. It's if you follow my Twitter, there's a few tweets on it. I made a video on it.
Usporos asked, did we figure out what Intel screwed up in the 13th and 14th gen? No,
not yet.
And it's really interesting though, because it's non-obvious, and a lot of the errors that bubbled up only bubbled up because of looking at the data in a different way. Things like PCIe errors. Like normally, I don't want to say it's hard, but normally with those, like the type of overclocking a gamer is going to do, you wouldn't generate this kind of PCI Express like data errors that you would normally get like from the bus. Like you would have file integrity errors, like reading this file, oh, there's an error in this file, there's a checksum mismatch. You wouldn't actually get like lower level, the bus has shit the bed.
It's the ultimate thing. Is can you catch every error on the CPU?
Yeah.
No.
And there's I mean, even I think the Intel desktop CPUs, I have to go back and look at the Intel reference. Like we're going really far down in the levels of the dungeon here. But I want to say that the leaky bucket that Intel has for reporting those kind of errors, like you have to already be getting a lot of errors for the system to actually forward those errors to the operating system. Like you get at least,
it has to be statistically significant.
Yeah, it has to be more than like 1 or 2 per second, or there are specifications for that, and so it's a lot. Like you get a lot of errors before you're actually notified of errors.
It's if you go into the performance monitoring of your Intel CPU, one of the things will be memory hard faults, and you'll probably get a few per second.
Yeah.
But it's not until you actually hit dozens that it actually thinks, oh, something may be wrong here, because they're recoverable or they're inconsequential. So,
what is your recommended next-gen M.2 SSD to watch out for? Anything that surpasses my love of Optane?
No.
I'm using a P5800X Optane, which is about a $3,000 SSD in my work machine, and you can have that when you pry it out of my cold, dead hands.
Don't I still owe you for a couple of Optane drives?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you bring me any more?
No.
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 Those are on sale, by the way. Use my Newegg affiliate code. They're like $230 for 1.5 terabyte. Now, those are the older generation. They don't have the burst speed, but they do have the very low latency.
Are they the 905Ps?
The 905Ps, yes. 1.5 terabytes for like $230.
I may have to get you to order some more for me. And I will pay you this time.
If you work on databases, like if you're just like you're DBA and you have like a little test system that you run your little databases on and you're doing export imports, trust me, bro. Get the Optane.
It's over the past year, I've bought about 10 4 terabyte 990 Pros, because when they're on offer, you can get them for about $230.
Yeah.
The prices went up for like the last 6 or 7 months, but Samsung's been doing rebates, and I've been cashing in every time. So I've got a 4x4 M.2 card in my system that's just 4 terabyte 990 Pros. There's one in here. I'm gonna put one in here.
Yay!
Assuming I can get an image to copy over. So yeah, it's I've proliferated them just because it's the right mix of Samsung SSD, which is usually on the good side of all right. Though I've seen reviews that the 990 Pro isn't, how it used to be of old. It's still a good drive, and yeah, you can get them quite cheap.
I would agree with that. And
yeah.
Usporos also asks, did you check to see if any of the chips are installed upside down on the board? Just got a batch of Intel boards where 80% of one of the PLCs were soldered in upside down. And he's not kidding.
Do we name and shame the vendor? the board partner. And that's like a that should. The thing is, in order to stop that happening, that's usually visual inspection. And all it is somebody puts the reel in the wrong way around.
Yeah.
Have you done content on motherboard.
Yeah.
I've actually been invited to China to go see a factory.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure if you've got that email.
Gigabyte has got their factory in Taipei that has all of that machinery, and it is incredible.
Yeah, Gigabyte always does at least pre-pandemic, I remember, you always used to do something. Let's see if I can get this email. But yeah, it's just standard pick and place machines.
Please confirm we're doing decomp stress tests at least. Yes, one of the test suites that runs is 7-zip compress as part of the Phoronix test suite, but it's been modified slightly so that it runs for like a day and a half. It's sometimes we get a machine that'll pass Y-Cruncher, but it'll fail that test, which is interesting.
Huh. No, did you see that? Did you have that yet?
No.
Did you see the dates?
That's gonna. I can't.
It's just on the edge of yeah. I got a message from Felix, FCLC. He sends over 279 Canadian. That's like a poutine and a mousse.
Oh, nice.
How do you communicate AI performance to the average user? You don't mention AI at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. There's no killer application. I mean, you can talk about tokens per second, but that's going to vary between model and like
accuracy.
Llama, like it's just the versions. It's like it got more optimized.
Or you can the Q4 versus the Q8 version, the Q40 versus the Q4_4 version.
Or Q4 when you're running it at the beginning of 2024 versus Q4 at the end of 2024. It's going to be wildly different.
Yeah.
What's the best storage solution looking at the dimension of power draw? At 0.51 cents a kilowatt hour, I'm suddenly a lot more aware of the power draw of my gear.
Of storage?
Yeah.
If you look individual drives, is it the P31s that use half channels? So they're typically the lowest power NVMe drives that we usually talk about. Nobody else does 4-channel drives yet. So normally an M.2 drive is 8-channel. That's just how they get the speed. By doing 4-channel, you lose some of the peak. You get all the same throughput pretty much.
2 up and 2 down.
Yeah. That's not a by 2 drive. It's still a by 4 drive.
Well, but
it's effectively a by 2 drive.
Yeah.
Whereas the system itself, what NAS storage solution for low power?
The Asus store all flash is surprisingly low power. The new one is Ryzen based. The old one is only 4 core. Also, I think enterprise storage, like I'm thinking like a Kioxia CD5, you could probably get a 16 terabyte one of those for your budget, and those are under 25 watts, and that's going to be less power than a collection of M.2s.
Yeah. You don't get redundancy in the same way though.
Yeah, well, you could run 2 of them, 16 terabytes. 3, you should run 3 though, because then you only lose half a drive.
But buy some storage and make it the most expensive, and get 3 of them. Yeah.
No, you can get a pretty good deal on 16 terabyte NVMe on U.2 NVMe on eBay.
Skillet Pan asks, is the issue with Intel a possible tile interconnect issue? Bad mounting of the CPU heatsink. There was a PS5 issue to do with heating cooling over time that killed their CPUs. Similar. So are 13th and 14th gen tiled? No, they're monolithic.
Yeah.
So because it's I forget the names. Alder Lake was 12th, then it was no, not Coffee. Yeah, but no, they're monolithic. Mounting of the CPU heatsink, no, over so many systems.
I thought about some of the errors. Like there's a handful of systems, just for lack of time, but there's a handful of systems that I really went deep, and they were doing such wild things that I was thinking, okay, if this is a heat problem, ultimately I decided it's probably not a heat problem, but I was thinking if this is a heat problem, it would have to be something wild, like the solder between the heat spreader and the chip itself is like missing a tiny little circle around the ring bus or around the memory controller. And so there's a hot spot that's getting super hot that is away from a temperature sensor, And when that crosses a threshold, or that causes degradation because there's like a hole in the solder because they did a bad job soldering. And I've actually, while I've been in Paris, I've gotten some extra CPUs at my office. Like these, like, and this is wild because like not only do you have access to the data, they're like, here, let's send you crates of hardware. It's like you're the Wendell. You'll get it done. It's just like,
Yeah, that means whenever we say Wendell from now on, we have to say the Wendell.
I mean,
The Great Majesto.
I'm just some rando, really. It's fine. But
Rando with a voice.
there's a lot of hardware at my office now that is troubled hardware, and I have
Troubled hardware needs troubleshooting. That's why it's called troubleshooting.
I have permission to disassemble it. I have a friend that runs a pet veterinary hospital, pet hospital, and they have an X-ray machine. So I wonder if it's good enough to X-ray the solder distribution through the IHS. Oh, Braithorn, $5, thank you. Adam at PC World gave me an unopened 2920X and an X399 Mobo. Gonna build a streaming storage system on it, and I'd love to get your input on it. Sure, that's fine. Just email me, Wendell at level1text.com. That's fine. That probably actually would make a good like FreeNAS system or something like that.
If you can drive it into a low power mode because it's 7 plus, isn't it? So
yeah.
Ace of Spades asks, do you feel it's misleading for Snapdragon SoCs to be benched on ARM versions of Geek and Cinebench, where nearly all Windows apps are x86 and will suffer from emulation performance penalties? Oh, okay. He's saying why bench ARM native when most apps people are going to be using are going to be x86 native through emulation. The answer to that is based on the market research Qualcomm has done, and you can believe me or not believe me, this is just what they say. From their perspective, the average user, 90% of the hours consumed on the device will be using ARM native software. Right? So if you're 5 hours in Office a day and then 3 hours in Chrome and then an hour in another, that's your 90% of hours time, even though it's 66% of programs you've used. And the problem we have as a community is that most of the time we talk about our use cases and we are enthusiasts, or at least the tech people in the family, or we do it for business. We're looking at the business aspect. So our programs are going to be wildly varied. The chances of them being native is low, though that's a game of whack-a-mole, as it always is. They've already targeted the top 1,000 apps. Qualcomm is pushing more on the B2B side to a certain extent with the Snapdragon hardware. So they are looking at see, can we sell 20,000 devices to Snapple, to Dr. Pepper, right? And so they go to that company and say, what software do you use that's non-standard? Well, we have this management engine and this ticket engine and this VPN. So they go and optimize for that customer, and then to try and get that sale. That's because AMD did that back in the day.
I would add that the tool chain for ARM is already quite mature. The rough spots of the tool chain are around things where you need a kernel mode driver, and you don't need it. And it's a philosophical. Like when I say you need a kernel mode driver, you don't. But there's warring factions, and the people that don't want you to do kernel mode drivers and don't want the cruft of PC, which is generally I would lean toward agreeing with. Like your crappy HP inkjet printer should not do the awful things that it does to your machine when you install drive. That just shouldn't be permitted. And so ARM is an opportunity for Microsoft to put their foot down and be like, we're not going to do this. Well, you're going to have companies like Sony, they're just going to do it anyway because they've got the money, and they'll find some workaround, and then the workaround that they find will, get cemented into the ARM ecosystem from now until the end of time. Ordinary app developers actually would have a very easy time porting their applications to ARM mostly. There is some inside insanity that I alluded to, which is for libraries and things that companies depend on. They may not realize it, but there are certain things that companies may think that they are able to just hit recompile in Visual Studio and get an ARM binary, and it will not work that way. That was one of the famous mistakes that Amazon made with Gravitons. They expected Java to be able to just run on Graviton. and they found that companies had put binary stuff in Java, and then that had to be ported to Graviton, and that was a huge engine. Like they had it was very a lot of raised eyebrows, a lot of suffering. And so there's a lot of little details like that that'll make for a bad experience. But generally, it's not going to be that. Like for just normal applications, like I want my time tracking application or my business app to run on ARM. You just recompile it, and you're fine.
Yeah, as long as you still have access to the software chain.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, older stuff. That's really.
Yeah.
Do you think Intel or AMD will increase their mainstream chipsets PCIe lane counts? I'm trying to fit more U.2 and 10G Ethernet in my future x870E build, but all the lanes are M.2 slots underneath GPU slots, leaving only 2/3 physical x16 slots. So it's more complicated than that. I think what we eventually will see is an affordable chipset that takes 4 or 8 Gen 5 lanes and gives you a larger number of lower spec lanes. It's not that you need more lanes, it's just that you need more efficient use of the bandwidth. I think 8 lanes of Gen 5 beyond the 16 lanes that you get for your GPU is plenty for an AM5 desktop, but the most efficient way to use it would be to give you 16 to 24 Gen 3 lanes to split up among your not high-speed devices.
There is some limitation in terms of device enumeration, so you can't expand indefinitely. If you remember back in the Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge, Haswell days, there was a chipset called Z77, and one of the features on the high-end boards there was the addition of a PCIe switch, usually made by PLX, the PLX 8000 series. You'd either have 8 or 16 lanes in, and it would give you 64 out because it's multiplexer, demultiplexer. Those chips at the time cost around $100, or added $100 to the cost of the motherboard. So we only saw it in $400, $500, $600 motherboards, whereas nowadays $400 is the base cost of a motherboard. That's a different rant.
I am excited that we've got Phison making redrivers and.
Yeah. So my point being is that when Avago bought PLX, then Avago bought Broadcom and then renamed themselves Broadcom, and they still have the ticker AVGO. The price of the PLX chips went up by 3x because it was seen as an enterprise product. We never saw the PLX 9000 chips ever hit consumer. I think we ended up with some Z87 motherboards. Had a couple of them.
I did a live stream at the time lamenting how this was going to ruin my dream motherboard.
Yes, and so because that was the way to bring 4 GPUs to a consumer system and have technically enough bandwidth, maybe not upstream bandwidth, but at least between GPU bandwidth, which is something that AI needs right now.
Yeah.
Which would be great. There are other
PCIe Phison going crazy.
Yeah. There are other PCIe switch vendors out there now. Microchip is a competitor, but they, in the same way that 10 gig Ethernet for the longest time has been seen as the premium Ethernet spec and not a consumer product. PCI, and it's coming down to consumer level, at least copper, 10 gig. PCIe switches went the other way, and quite hard. So when you talk about Intel or AMD developing a chipset that is basically a PCIe switch with additional functionality like USB, what's the feature that Intel uses for its Wi-Fi, that sort of stuff, you end up almost competing in that market. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a market they want to go after. A, because you suddenly have a new business division you have to go manage. But also B, you end up competing with your partner. And that can cause issues. What a lot of people may not know is that Intel chipsets for a Yeah.
It's the one battery-powered thing that we have. But good news is we're going to pass the YouTube engagement challenge right back in 30 seconds. That was wild because all of the bars were there.
Sweet.
We're
So our setup, we have one battery powered thing, and it ran out of battery. Clunk. Audio died at Intel chips for a lot. Yeah.
Intel chips for a lot. What?
I don't know.
Well, Usforos tried to give us more money. That did not work out. And then somebody asked something. I don't know.
Yeah. What don't we know about Intel chipsets? Oh, all of that was lost. Some Intel or a good amount of Intel chipsets have been made on Samsung at Samsung Foundry.
And TSMC.
It's they're not exactly dual sourcing, but it'll be this chipset will be on Samsung, this chipset will be on TSMC, and it's because Intel's process is mostly a performance-based process, or at least it is up until Intel 4, Intel 3. So they utilized external resources. Intel is still, I want to say, a top 10 customer, maybe even a top 4 customer of TSMC.
Yeah.
Right? They buy a lot of this.
That was before Lunar Lake.
Even before, even before Alchemist, right? Because Intel does a lot of silicon that isn't just CPUs, and to some extent, FPGA stuff and some of the legacy and some of the embedded stuff, all the some of the 5G ORAN stuff. Yeah, so it's
We were also making fun of how the chipset had secret hidden x86 cores.
Yeah, and I mentioned that even the modems used to, back when Intel had a modem division.
They should have never got rid of that. They should have never got rid of OmniPath. OmniPath is not nearly as unreasonable and meme-like as I thought it was going to be.
OmniPath still exists.
It's fine.
It's still called OmniPath.
Yeah, well, I mean, more right now, yeah.
It's now owned by a company called Cornelis Networks.
It's 400 gigs is soon, TM.
Is that the CN5000?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said it should be by end of year, even though they announced it last year.
Somebody sent me heartbreaking pictures of dumpsters filled with the 200 gig gear that they just scrapped. They're just like, nope, not doing it. It's just like, but
they didn't release it, did they?
No.
No. So
the E810 stuff has entered mass production, and we're starting to see 100 gigabit dual 100 gig E810, which have some interesting properties, and are quite nice. But
yeah,
those are 100 gig.
Samsung doesn't make any of Intel's CPUs, consumer CPUs anyway. They might do some Atom-based stuff.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So yeah, F's in the chat for audio. It's now back online.
Sorry. Hopefully it sounds good again. My bad.
Oh, I think I was half an hour back on the chat, and some of it's. I'm at the point where people are saying China, 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 China. It's oh yeah, $2 from just watching YouTube. Thank you. Just wanted you to know I love your channel.
Oh, thank you. Just watching YouTube. We appreciate you.
At least one of us does.
No, he sent me $2 too. They sent me $2.
I mean, between the three of us, at least somebody loves. It's
Listen, that keeps me awake at night.
It's we're talking about this. YouTube isn't our main jobs.
No.
And we're thankful for that.
Yes.
Because we have so many friends in this industry who rely on day-to-day on YouTube just to feed their family, to pay their mortgage. And we're both thankful that neither of us are in that. So we get to do what we want.
Yeah, it really, it's unsettling. The only time that I've ever had the same level of unsettling in day job is with the Broadcom VMware acquisition, which is personally has and continues to cost me vast sums of money.
Money or sleep?
money.
Cost you?
Yeah.
You're not generating business off. Oh.
Yeah, they've really they torpedoed the absolute bejesus out of some revenue streams.
Oh, I see. It's not. They're killing your potential to earn, not
Yeah.
actually taking money away from you.
Yeah, no. It's I mean, VMware is a fantastic product, and it solved a lot of problems in very specific ways, and you know, I could do some magic things with it, but
Mm.
yeah, I have some customers that are just
Is it-
not happy with it.
Mergers and acquisitions screw people like us
Yeah,
because it suddenly means that what may have been two clients in the past
yeah.
suddenly become one, or new management comes in and becomes zero.
It's always the rug pull. I never want to put myself in a position where there can be a rug pull, or if there is a rug pull, I don't want it to negatively. It's like, oh, this thing blew up. I don't really care. It's fine, whatever. And I always expected YouTube to be that, and YouTube certainly has aspects of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I never would have figured that VMware customers would suffer the way that they have. The smaller customers would suffer the way that they have under the Broadcom acquisition. It's wild. It's absolutely wild.
Didn't they only give like a year for the?
There's at least one contract where they only got notice that they were going up 300%. It was about a 45-day notice.
And I assume that's for a company that has hundreds of millions of revenue.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of that kind of stuff, I'm just the messenger, but it still doesn't mean that I don't get shot at.
Speaking of M&As, did you see the announcement that AMD has acquired Silo.ai?
Oh yeah.
So AMD's been on an acquisition spree for its AI software division. They did
software in general.
Yeah.
There have been some acquisitions that have flown under the radar in terms of like, ooh, we should hire a lot of programmers.
The ones that they've announced and they continue to announce is Mipsology, Nod.ai, and now Silo.ai. If I remember the press release, they said company based in Helsinki, basically designed around optimizing performance for AI software. Now Helsinki has a top 5 supercomputer called Lumi, built on the MI250X.
Interesting.
And they've been running LLMs on Lumi, so I can only imagine that that's part of the Radeon Instinct optimization team. They made a big deal about how the company's 300 people, but like 150 PhDs. Acquisition was like 600 million, so it's 2 million per person.
That is what's needed. I
mean, yeah, there are so many companies out, so many startups out there doing amazing things with the hardware that companies like AMD, Nvidia, Intel, it's like, oh crap, we should have been doing that before they were. How do we get ahead of this? Acquisition.
Yeah.
So it's not really for the business, it's for the headcount. So it's what we call an acquihire. Also in acquihire news, you may or may not care about this, but darling of the AI industry, GraphCore, who had a burn rate of $200 million a year and revenue of less than $3 million a year because they made an AI chip before Transformers and never updated it. They have been acquired by SoftBank, the company that owns the majority share of ARM. The idea being that SoftBank wants to play in AI hardware, so they're hiring a team. This happened yesterday, literally. I was pinging back and forth with the PR agent at Qualcomm, at GraphCore that I know, and he said there's no monetary figure that's being announced, though the company did raise 730 million in funding, but we think the number's less than that. Current GraphCore products will be supported. Nothing to say about any future hardware. They were meant to launch a 3nm chip last year, but TSMC 3nm for big chips isn't necessarily that ready yet. Blackwell's going to be the big one on that. I spoke to some people saying that actually, as a company, because they're running out of money, they put the hardware on the back burner and focused more on the software. But GraphCore has always been heralded as one of the first AI hardware unicorns, and they're now SoftBank. So I've asked if I can have an interview with the CEO. I should get information about that next week. So I may go over to Bristol to interview either Nigel or Simon.
That actually sounds really, really interesting. And SoftBank usually has its pulse on the finger on the pulse of really interesting things. They don't always execute well. See also WeWork, but it's fine. Were they WeWork? Maybe I'm misremembering.
Yes, yeah, they lost a lot of money on WeWork.
Yeah, that wasn't a good idea.
But also they tried to sell ARM to Nvidia,
Ah,
and that didn't work out. So they IPO'd what 10% of ARM in the end, so they still have a 90% ownership. Oh, frozen video.
no.
Are you at least getting the audio?
Yeah, they're getting the audio, but no video.
The camera is still moving on its display. Oh, do we unplug and plug?
Yeah,
Or is it OBS deactivate, activate?
probably OBS.
Yeah. Yep, there we go. We're back. And my number of viewers dropped by 10% again. We had the audio issue, it dropped 10%. We had this issue, it dropped 10%.
Sorry, gang.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Our impromptu live stream wasn't designed to last more than 12 minutes.
Yeah,
Intel is pissed. Yeah, maybe.
It's I've been critical of GraphCore over time because one, they had a really bad PR engagement, and I tried to get stuff out of them and I just couldn't get anything. Then their CEO seemed to spend more time on selling his book than on the company.
Sometimes it do be like that. It's like, I'm tired of all this VMware Broadcom shenanigans. I just want to write a book.
Yeah. Well, they're ex-academics, and if they're not making any money out of the startup they've spent on 7 years, then make money out of the book about the startup.
Thank you again, Linux Gemini. Appreciate it. I did say it was going to be a low production value event. That is correct. And also, when I said Unplugged, because Unplugged is in the title of mine, I literally meant Unplugged.
It's we don't have alcoholic beverages. Can you drink?
Not really.
No.
I don't like anything that messes with my brain.
Eh.
It's worrisome when it's quiet in there.
That includes uppers and downers.
Yeah, they gave me a prescription, but it was too powerful. No prescription.
Crypto CS guy says I should come back to England and go to the Cambridge Science Park and do interviews with upper management in the UK tech industry. So that's where ARM is. Actually, I would like you to describe what I'm about to show you.
Okay.
And if anybody from PR is watching, you're about to have a massive hissy fit. What's that?
Like, just the contact card?
Do you know who that is?
I mean, like a WhatsApp contact? No.
Yes, that's a WhatsApp contact.
Oh, neat.
So what is it?
That's the CEO
Of
ARM Holdings.
in my
In your phone, you can just call him, just chat with him. He's on the WhatsApp.
yeah.
You should lecture him about using Signal instead.
It's yes, I should. Who was I having this discussion with? Was it with Linus or was it with Luke? No, it may have been with Austin Evans. The three most important people in your phone book. Now, obviously, phone book is, millennial speaking here.
I don't save phone numbers in my phone in case it's ever hacked.
So you have some family and that's it.
No.
No?
Literally nothing.
Nothing.
I have to memorize all the numbers. It's a little bit of a pain.
I think mine is Renee, Jim Keller, and Linus.
Nice.
They're my three that I can boast.
Linus has called me before. I should have his number somewhere, but I think I deliberately didn't
Oh.
save it in case it was hacked.
Wasn't he on a WAN show and he dialed you to just clarify something? Because he
Yeah.
does that from time to time.
Yeah.
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 Never done that with me. He doesn't love me as much as he loves you.
That's I just fix things quickly sometimes.
Yeah. It's
There was something. I only mentioned this because this was like 2 days ago. Jake was having trouble with something. He's like, "Man, why does it take so long to allocate 3 TB of memory?" And it's like, because you turned on clear memory before allocation, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh," and so I turned that off. And so it's like, I admire that you're trying to flex that you have 3 TB of memory, but like, just turn off pre-allocation and it'll allocate instantly. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Holy shit, it allocates instantly." I might have been to this rodeo time. I don't personally own a system with 3 TB of memory, but
I'm close. I have a 2 terabyte system.
yeah, I've got a 1.5 TB system, but yeah. Why are laptops that are manufactured after 2023, 90% of them are maxing out with 32 gigs of LPDDR4, but Lenovo and Dell support soldered standard and capability of 64 gigs?
That's a limitation of the standard DDR5 memory controller, or the DDR5 memory controller.
Thank you immensely, Craig H. And that's not changing with Lunar Lake. It's only 16 and 32 gig configurations.
Yeah. Yeah, if an LPDDR system will have half the max capacity support of a DDR system. That's an industry thing. That's a standards thing.
It also makes the people from Intel very uncomfortable when you ask, wait a minute, didn't you say this was the answer to Apple's stuff? Like, where's my 96 gigs?
Oh. Yeah.
They're unhappy.
There are reasons for that that I can't go into due to NDA.
Soon.
Give it a few months. Yeah, I can't really say much.
Ironically, 96 gigs on some of the mini PCs is possible, but it's because it's not LPDDR.
Yeah, standard 64 gigabyte UDIM
should be possible. Those are not available
sticks are coming.
Yes.
Right now, 48 gigabytes is in the market. That means you have the phrase being used is non-binary memory, even though it technically is. It's what Patrick Kennedy from Serve the Home used, and I've just been using it. So apparently the 24 and 48 gig sticks overclock better than the standard 16 and 32s, if you're unaware. So if you want to push some memory, and then we've got Cam 2 potentially down the pipe.
I just ordered a crap load of ECC UDIMs, and I was surprised how much cheaper the 48 gig ECC UDIMs were. Shockingly cheaper than getting on the pre-order list for 64 gigs. And I just assumed it was because everybody was like
waiting.
all the big, like the real big customers, as opposed to the people ordering, $100,000 at a time. Those are small customers. I assumed it was something like that, but I think it actually might be more stable too. So it's probably related to the overclocking.
It's because it's a non-standard factor of 2, there's some density stuff they have to do. So I think the die sizes for 64 are the same as the 48, and so it's like storage, right? We're playing right now with QLC, but if you took the cell size of QLC and made it bigger and better for SLC, you have an amazingly fast drive. You just you change on capacity. So it's always trade-offs when you're trying to do at the edge.
JP, do you think AMD will offer an N100 price for performance CPU? I've always suggested that AMD do that. I've repeatedly asked them. Yeah, they're not going to.
No.
But Minis Forum might, or B-Link, or one of those, because there are chips that they can draw from that are basically the garbage chips from the industrial side.
From the AMD side, think about what AMD sells as a full company, top to bottom of the stack, and think about what products offer the most margin. You've got Instinct, then you've got Epic, then you've got Gaming Ryzen, then you've got regular Ryzen. Technically, we should perhaps put the top-end Xilinx FPGAs up the top somewhere as well. At the bottom is all the education stuff, is all the low end. embedded can vary between low and high depending on what market it is, but that tends to be a volume play. And when you look at these companies, if you look at their financials, look at their gross margins. Because right now they're trying to get, I can't remember what AMD's exactly is right now, but Intel's used to be in the mid 60s and it's right now in the low 50s or even in the high 40s. AMD's has been going up constantly because they're refocusing on the high end, on the high end, on the high end. Discrete GPUs tend to be below CPUs, and which is annoying because they put in a lot more work into discrete GPUs. So when people say, why aren't they focusing on gamers? Or why isn't any company focusing on gamers? Or why aren't they even laptops? Laptops fall in that sort of low margin area as well. Why aren't they focusing on this area? Because they can go and sell AI chips and earn more money. And if you've got limited supply at places like TSMC, or in packaging like CoWoS, you're going to spend they're going to spend more of their wafer allocation go building the high-end chips that they can sell, and that there's oversubscribed demand. So, and that, take NVIDIA. NVIDIA now makes about $28 billion a quarter.
Yep.
25 of that is in enterprise.
Yeah.
Why would they care about the 3 that's in gaming?
You say that, but the counterexample of that is Jetson.
Wait, Jetson or Jensen?
Jetson. It's $500. It's a tiny little. Okay, well, there's one that's $2,000 and there's one that's $500.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic enterprise embedded dev platform. AMD needs that.
Yeah.
And they could just co-op mini just go to B-Link and be like, here's one of our laptop CPUs that can do 50 tops or whatever. There you go. And then it's just like, here's your dev kit, and we'll put all the swill CPUs in it that we're not bound for laptops anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they announced, Ryzen AI 300 series at Computex, right? And the low-end chips of that, whatever core counts they are, ASPs on that are probably $100 less than. That's something you can stick into a dev system like a Jetson. So,
can I solder 32 gigs on an 11th gen Yoga 7i? Maybe if you're really talented, I don't know. I need to look at the circuit board. And
but with those, not artificial, third-party upgrades where you double the memory, it's always an issue of the firmware, whether it accepts the address space. There was somebody who doubled the memory on a GPU recently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Was that in South America?
I remember seeing that. I don't know where it was.
Yeah. They had to do some work in the firmware as well to get it to work. So, Gentlestone, GNTL Stone, asks, what CPUs are you most interested in or excited for in the coming generation? To be honest, this was the big one. Orion.
Yeah.
Snapdragon, because new microarchitecture. Zen 5 is a because when I last interviewed Mike Clark and even Jim Keller, they were quite clear on this. Zen 5 is a complete clean sheet rewrite, redefining the baseline in performance. And they preview some of that performance at Computex. Lunar Lake, no, I'm interested in Lunar Lake for different reasons than most people.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you on the different reasons.
So what's your reason?
TSMC integration, what they're doing with the WDDM driver stack, and if they're actually going to address because now they've got the on-packaged DDR5, so they can solve a lot of the lingering x86 EFI sleep problems. And so it's like, did they actually do that?
You're speaking to a guy who constantly puts his device in hibernate, not sleep. Yeah.
I have to too, just because necessity, not because it's like this is the better solution.
No, mine is more. Too many of my devices like to wake from sleep even when they're closed because the mouse moves. I forgot to turn off my mouse and put it in my bag.
And then it murders itself in your bag.
Yeah. It overheats and burns all the battery.
64 gigs of memory is not fun. On Hibernate.
Yeah. Yes. The reason I'm interested in Lunar Lake is because from a design perspective, it completely rewrites how Intel designs a processor.
Yeah, the TSMC aspect.
No, mine's more from the EDA.
Oh, okay.
From the software side. So Intel for so many years, with their own process node stuff, or even with the TSMC stuff, they've been using their own chip design tools, the software, the EDA, the electronic design automation. And as a result, they have a massive stack of tools built for high performance. Is your stream still going? No. It's pausing. Okay.
That might
Yeah.
be a bandwidth thing.
Yeah. Yes, it's okay. Mine's back on now. And the issue with their first attempt at Foundry was that if you wanted to build a chip on Intel, you had to use Intel's own tools, but Intel wouldn't let you without supervision.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why it failed.
That world is gone now.
Yeah, and in order to, and it also meant that any engineer that built Intel chips couldn't easily go to another company because they weren't used to the software stack. With Lunar Lake, that changes. Lunar Lake is now built from the ground up using industry standard EDA tools.
Yes.
Cadence, Synopsys, Siemens, and also it's an integration of the, whether you like to use the term or not, the AI tools.
Yeah.
So what this means is that when Intel says that they took out hyperthreading for Lunar Lake, whether you think that's a good decision or not, the fact that they've used these industry standard tools, the fact that it is in the integration of the first proper generation of machine learning into those tools, they were able to say, we need these blocks in the design, let the system work it out. And that arguably cuts 6 months off the design. If they want to add it back in, they don't need to do a full end-to-end design anymore. They can just change a few things in the software, press a button, go to the manufacturing, then the validation, and you know.
And just to underscore something he said, AI has already been used to help with routing, layout, overcoming issues like, hey, you probably shouldn't put this type of a structure so close to this type of a structure.
It's the EDA world is a little bit of a frustrating one because the routing of stuff, that has been called AI for 30 years. It's not actually AI. It's just pure heuristic.
That's true.
You know, algorithmic stuff. It's now actually moving to machine learning. So in some ways it's generative, but the argument these companies are making is that, okay, so you have this design block in your chip. If we take these 10 engineers, give them 3 months to go optimize it in silicon, they can get, you know, this wire latency for this impedance for this frequency. Now we stick it in our machine learning suite for a week, and they get 20% better on every metric.
Yeah. Just like Photoshop is learning how you Photoshop out the background.
Yeah.
EDA is learning how you make the traces magical.
And we're already seeing it in the optics.
Yeah.
You know, machine learning is being used in the optics, or GPU compute is being used in optics. That's something different. But NVIDIA has said repeatedly that their next generation Blackwell was written with AIs optimized by other AIs.
Yeah.
So they're using their second, third, or fourth generation chip design AIs to go build Blackwell for the most optimal performance power area. I think Intel's said that they've been using it in their mobile GPU design pre Lunar Lake, but now it's, you know, for a lot of the chip, not just the GPU. I can't remember AMD saying anything on the record. Same thing with Qualcomm. I imagine Apple's using it in some fashion. It's still a very nascent field. I've been getting to grips with some of it with Synopsys because it's public knowledge, but I signed Synopsys as a client a few months ago. And just as some shameless self-promotion, next week on LinkedIn, I will be there will be a stream of me with one of the VPs at Synopsys talking about PCIe 7.
Ooh, we need that. We need optical though. I need.
We touch on electrical, optical. We touch on, so it's the PCIe 7's on like version 0.5, But that's the time when companies like Synopsys essentially give their partners the design kit and the validation and the simulation and the emulation tools to get started. Because at 0.5, most of the spec is decided. Between 0.5 and 1, it's figuring out the little minor issues.
Patrick Lee asks, what is Global Foundries up to these days? I don't have a good answer for that.
I have been invited to Global Foundries Tech Day.
Ooh.
August 26th. So it's literally the day after Hot Chips. Last year I went and I interviewed the CEO. You can watch that interview on Tech Potato. It's a fun one because this is a guy I haven't actually talked to in person for like 8 years, and he's still the same. It's Dr. Thomas Caulfield is the CEO of Global Foundries. Because they're no longer focusing on the high end, and that is both a corporate decision and a financial decision. Basically, their investor wanted to stop losing money. I found out what happened to their 2 EUV machines. One got sold to a research facility, and the other one got returned, and the restocking fee was like 90%. Yeah, you don't get much return if you don't get much back if you return an EUV machine.
It seems like it would have been fine to just sell it.
I think it was a matter of timing and capability and whatever.
That's wild.
So I think the one that they installed, 99%, that's the one that had the restocking fee. The one that was still in bits, they could sell quite easily.
Oh, okay.
But they're mostly focusing on the ancillary silicon around AI. We used to call it legacy nodes. They're calling it something like critical or impossible nodes. But the way I present it, and this isn't a Global Foundries line, this is my own, based on research I've seen. Take a smartphone. Did I actually bring mine? Take a smartphone, right? How much silicon in here do you think is on the leading edge?
Very little.
The answer's less than 30%. The rest uses legacy nodes. So you've got the SoC, you've got the modem, and the memory.
Yep.
They're all leading edge. Everything else, like the display controller, like the power management, the PMIC, and everything else, is not. If you in terms of the cost of the silicon, it's probably 80% leading edge still.
I would argue the memory is just the flash is probably like bottom of the barrel Samsung. At least for Samsung phones.
Yeah, but so
the stuff that no one else wanted to buy goes in our phones.
If you look at TSMC's financials, their legacy node revenue, in terms of dollar amount, it has been increasing over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I think Q2 last year was their highest ever revenue on 65 nanometer.
Yeah.
And this is even if you include the time when 65 nanometer was leading edge.
Yeah. Everybody needs more chips no matter what.
They're making more in 65 nanometer today than they ever have.
Yeah.
So that's what Global Foundries is doing. I will have more to say at the end of August.
Benchkin asks, I got an ASRock EP2C612WS with 2 E5 2680V4. It was a dream machine for me 10 years ago. What was your dream machine that you got? I was barely a teenager, and I did a tech project for money. And so I had more money than I knew what to do with as a teenager. And I got a dual socket. It was an 8-bit BP6 with 2 Celeron 300As overclocked to 450. And I have never been more excited and more just like the first time that I booted up the operating system and it was like there's 2 processors and like I could run something and the machine wouldn't bog down and be weird while I was running something was just, it was a magical experience that I think that when I first played with Threadripper, I got pretty close. And it was just like, this is just a normal desktop machine just sitting here? Like, what's going on?
Did you have a unified North bridge between the 2 CPUs, or did you have massive NUMA issues?
No, it was the same architecture as dual Pentium 3.
Yeah, they had the separate North bridge, didn't they?
Yeah, you had to go out and back in.
But could you use one North bridge between 2 CPUs, or? Yeah, so you didn't have NUMA issues.
Yeah, well, you didn't have NUMA issues, but it was still
because the memory controller was on Northbridge.
Yeah. Yeah, it was still weird.
Yeah. I think for me it was so my intro into properly caring about hardware is perhaps a bit later than most people would think. My first proper desktop was at, excluding the 486s that I had when I was younger and whatever, because I went from that to playing consoles, then to like Core 2 Duo notebooks. I had an E6400 system, like everybody did, and I went from that to an i7 920.
That's quite a jump.
I had the cheapest X78. X78? No, I'm blanking here. I had the a 58, sorry, the EX58 UD3R, the cheapest X58 motherboard you could buy from Gigabyte. That's the one that had the 3+1 DRAM config. And I remember buying, I think 3 gigabytes of memory, maybe even 6, for like 300. Back when it was super expensive.
2 gigabyte sticks of memory. Ah!
But that was a quad-core 2.1 gigahertz chip you could overclock to 3.2.
Yeah.
And that was also the time when I got into clan gaming, into overclocking.
Without degradation over time.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And then after that, I got into reviewing. So I think the first systems I reviewed for an Antec with like an i5 2500K.
Yeah.
Yeah. So beyond that, it's I've always had the opportunity to have the latest and greatest on the CPU side. But i7 920 was yeah. I also have weird CPUs. I love my Curios. I have 2 Cannon Lakes.
I will get my hands someday on one of the Xeons that has the built-in HBM memory, just for giggles. Those are still wildly expensive on eBay.
Oh, well, the CPU Maxes.
Yeah, there's some good uses for those in like the finance, and so people are building like day trader boxes out of those because there's some special software that really loves HBM memory. But beyond that,
Intel's been weird about that. I mean, you got sampled Sierra Forest, right? You've been sampled. You'll be sampled Granite Rapids later this year. You had Emerald Rapids, you had Sapphire Rapids, but CPU Max, Intel doesn't want to admit. They almost admit they have that product.
it's for like one customer.
And a few supercomputers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, they need
It's made out of unicorn blood. There's not that many unicorns left.
well, it's like the Xeon plus FPGA. I want to say the 6138P. They made that for one customer, and you have to have a special BIOS to run it. So even if you get the chip, you need the right motherboard with the right BIOS.
And the tooling to do that probably doesn't exist anywhere. It's like, hey, we're gonna reprogram the FPGA and get it to run and do this thing.
Yeah.
Nope.
I mean, it was a standard Xeon Gold first gen scalable plus an Aria 10 FPGA in a package. So
All right, we've been at this 2.5 hours. We gotta wrap it up. We're gonna go, chat. You got just a few seconds left for any final questions, and thank you all for hanging out and being awesome.
yeah, let's keep going till the hour.
Yeah, that's 5 minutes, y'all.
Yeah. This is where we click the button that says push ad, push ad, push ad.
I haven't even done that. I haven't even cared.
Do you not get that? Zoom out of it. I think you've zoomed into your webpage, yeah. Oh, you have 2 buttons.
Yeah.
Oh, you can pause. I don't know. Wendell has more subscribers than I do. He gets more features.
It's fine.
Yeah. Amazingly fun time in Paris. Don't come here often enough.
Oh, Ian's here. Hello, Ian. How are you? Yes, it was for us. What's for dinner? What'd you think of lunch?
Lunch was good. Vegan ramen. You had...
I had a vegan burrito.
Yeah.
With
Well,
fries.
We went to a food hall, so...
Oh, Craig H. asks, your experience with hardware, if there was a printable online reference you recommended to anyone who wants to learn more of enterprise and consumer hardware. What's a good to show the evolution of enterprise hardware?
For as much as people want to understand the history of something, I think the best place to start is always in the here and now.
Yeah, and you can work backwards from that. There's a lot of enterprise hardware that is like dead end. You can get tons of dead end hardware for practically nothing on eBay, and doing postmortems on why this hardware didn't take off is often very fascinating.
We have a lot of peers whose channels are built around repurposing 3, 4, 5, even 8 generation old hardware.
Yeah.
The best thing is it's not going anywhere. So if you want to, playing and learning are two different things. If you just want to learn about how stuff has progressed, the history won't change. So start with today, because that's the latest and greatest, and work backwards. And then as you work further backwards, you'll get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, that was when I was doing the hardware rate is dead video. That was one of the really fascinating things is because it's like, well, there is actually stuff in the NVMe specification for data integrity fields, but only a few products from IBM actually implement it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, why is it like this? And then you go backwards and it's like, why is it like that? And then it's like, oh, mechanical hard drives had the option of 512 or 520 or 528 byte sectors on the mechanical disk.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is it, okay, why do we do that? And 520 byte sectors was actually wildly popular to the point that Oracle provided patches to the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel, like, understanding the history of the Linux kernel is also a great source of, like, if you get to that level, being able to read that, I can be a fly on the wall for some of those kinds of things. It's like, wait a minute, Oracle's responsible for adding 520 byte sector support into Linux? It's like, yeah, there you go.
It's I did a postmortem on Optane when it was declared dead. I've covered things like the overclockable Xeon, the only true, the one Xeon that everybody asked for years and years and years to be overclockable, and they finally made one. If you want to find something stupidly interesting, you know about this, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Search online for RK808 November 31st. It's about a chip that Rockchip made that thought there were 31 days in November.
the kernel can deal with that,
Yeah.
which is amazing. But that's also, like, stuff like that is why Linus Torvalds has a lot of quotes where he's just like, no, the kernel is done working around hardware bugs and software. You guys have to do better hardware. It's like, yeah fair. November 3rd.
I mean, the comment on this commit is it talks about the introduction of the calendar with Pope Gregory the 13th. It's somebody who was like, this shouldn't have happened, and why the F do I have to deal with it? Yeah. It's and there's tons of small stories that over time you just find.
I really like Linus Torvalds' attitude of, there's a lot of users that have this hardware and we will help the users not suffer. It's a very noble attitude, but it's not terribly pervasive in open source. I think he's very accurate when he describes. It's like, oh, look, you can install a distro, and then you immediately want to gatekeep that.
Yep.
You do not belong here.
Gatekeeping bad. Everyone is fun.
Yes. And the sunlight is almost gone.
Yes,
so
we should leave.
We're very, very dark now. Thank you all for hanging out. That was amazing.
Woo!
I think we're going to do a news live stream with Ryan and Krista on Monday. You won't be there for that.
No.
But I'll be there for that. But also you should check out Tech Potato, because that's linked in the description, although I messed up the description. But if you copy Tech Potato into the YouTube address bar, it will work.
Even if you just put Tech Potato, but if you also put level 1, you'll get all of his stuff as well.
Yeah, it's fine. Mostly I just ramble. It's more of the same, except I'm by myself.
I envy your rambling setup. I need a proper rambling setup. It's I've got a video to do on the whole SoftBank acquisition. There's a ton of stuff that I need to do. So.
Hold up, it's like 4 a.m. in Paris. You hush now.
Yeah. That's why it's dark outside. Haven't you noticed?
All right. Thank you all. I'm gonna wander over here so I can stop.
Oh, let's see.
Thank you again. Catch you later.
Woo!